Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Catholicos, Catholics, Orthodox, Christians, all who seek the truth. And to be Catholic is to be Orthodox. To be Catholic is to be traditional. There is no other way. Because there is only one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one and only Church of Jesus Christ, founded upon St. Peter and upon the apostles. Upon St. Peter and his successors and the bishops in communion with him. But that does not make us subservient slaves to the whims and delusions of a so-called successor of Peter. And in this case, we're talking about Francis Mario Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Bishop of Rome. Well, supposedly, assuming Benedict's resignation was even valid, renunciation of the active exercise of the office, which he did not abandon and was impossible for him to do, as his personal secretary himself has said, and Benedict himself has, in his last audience, said, his renunciation of the active exercise of the ministry does not revoke his acceptance of the office in 2005. Figure that one out, boys and girls. But let's ignore that. Let's ignore it. Now we're dealing with, again, one more time, the attempt to suppress the ancient liturgy of the Roman Church. And actually, the attempt to destroy the ancient liturgy of the liturgies and rites of the East through innovation, through facing the people, through having more audible prayers, through reforming their rites. So this is, and why is this happening? It's happening because they hate the apostolic faith. They hate the Christian faith. They hate the true faith, because it is the Christian faith. It is the apostolic faith. And how are they going about doing that? They're going about doing that through destroying the liturgy. And you will see from the supporters of the attempted destruction of the ancient rite, the unlawful, schismatic, and even heretical attempt to eliminate or abolish the ancient liturgy, which nobody and no pope and no so-called vicar of Christ has the power to do, because it's apostolic tradition and nobody has that power. And I did watch my other videos on the subject, because on the actual motu proprio. But today we're dealing again why. The question of why is because hatred to the faith. Hatred to the Christian faith, the Catholic Christian faith, the true Christian faith as it has been taught, believed, and lived up to 1969, when they introduced the deformed liturgy. And now they say, well, these two liturgies express two different faiths, two different ecclesiologies, two different perceptions, two different modes of life. They're incompatible. The innovators, the people who are cheering the attempted suppression. Well, they are true. It's true. There is no, and if it is true, so the hermeneutic of continuity of Benedict XVI was, a delusion, and calling the ancient, real Roman Rite the extraordinary form. There's like the one Roman Rite and has an extraordinary form, which is the real Roman Rite, and the ordinary form, which is the Rite of Paul VI. And quoting Paul VI himself again, it's the liturgical novelty or innovation of the new rite. He himself called it that, and contrasted it with the Roman Rite. So, and it's going to be about an hour and a half video, I'm guessing, because I hope you stay with me, because again, it is from their own mouths that they're telling you they don't like the Roman Rite, they don't like the ancient liturgy, they hate the pre-conciliar, the pre-Vatican II, even though Vatican II itself celebrated that Mass, the bishops there, a liturgy, because it conveys a different faith. not the conciliar faith. So now the question to you is, do you want the truth? Do you want to follow the Christian faith? Do you want to follow the apostolic faith? Now, if what they're saying is true, and it is true, because it's a different conception, then you have to ask yourself, which one is true? Is the one which is the faith has lived and taught for almost 2,000 years the true one, or the one which came out after the Second Vatican Council? And now, as I say, 95% of Vatican II is basically repeating Christian doctrine or teaching. It has a lot of like a lot of talking, speculation, but nothing affects doctrine. Even some innovative statements in it, even according to Paul VI, regarding, say, religious liberty or certain other problems, could be they are not bound, you are not bound by it, because it is not part of the universal. It is not the constant teaching of the church. If it contradicts the constant teaching of the church, then one has the right to question it. So this is the article, and it was published on Rorate Celi by it's a translation of Father Claude Barth's interview in a French publication, and he's the one who organizes the Summorum Pontificum pilgrimages. If you don't know, this is where all the, every year from 2007 or whenever it started, because Benedict XVI said, look, the ancient liturgy has never been abrogated, cannot be abrogated. What is always sacred cannot suddenly be forbidden. And the missal, the ancient rite, was never juridically abrogated, meaning forbidden, and therefore it was always licit to be used. So all these schismatic traditionalists who were celebrating the ancient liturgy even before Benedict XVI allowed it, widespread, no restrictions, they were just actually right since 50 years ago. So, and basically we're going to go through the article in a second, but basically he says this. The article is this Traditionis Custodes of Francis. Basically, it's a new liturgical war. It's a declaration of war on the ancient liturgy. Well, if you won war, then a war you will get. No more traditional Catholics, traditionalists, real Catholics should no longer whitewash the differences between the two rites, the real Roman Rite and the fake Roman Rite. They should no longer say, well, the new rite is pretty nice and it's, it has good elements. It is a novelty. It's an innovation, and it is an annoyance, as Paul VI himself says. And you will see, and I said that, and I quoted it in my previous video, so you watch it, and I show you the letters. So, no more nice guy. No more nice guy with a novel rite. I'm not saying it is invalid. I personally will go to the Novus Ordo, to the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, if I don't have the opportunity to go to the ancient liturgy, to the real Roman Rite, or to an Eastern Catholic rite. Then, well, it is better to go to a reverently celebrated Mass, because it is still a valid Mass with a validly ordained priest. Christ is there, than not to go to Mass at all. Of course, if it is it's a clown show at that Mass, of course, it's better not to go. That would be participation in sacrilege. Even with a reverently celebrated Mass, sacrilege is happening, because why? Communion in the hand. That is sacrilege number one. Eastern, it doesn't have. This is a total innovation. No church in the East or West ever had communion in the hand. From the Ethiopic Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox, Syriacs, ancient rites from India, Armenians, never ever. Communion in the hand was introduced by the heretics of the 16th century to destroy the notion that The Eucharist is God incarnate. So, hey, a piece of bread, it's just a memorial, just eat a piece of bread, So, we're going to get to this article, but I want to start, because you will see them, you will hear them say it is two different conceptions. Before, the pre-unreformed liturgy and the deformed liturgy. Of course, they call it the reformed. Well, that is why they hate it. That is why they aim to destroy it, because they aim to destroy the faith of Catholics. All right. Now let's, and it's not just the new Mass. I mean, the liturgy, it is like there is no single Roman rite. Every parish church has almost a different way of celebrating. Go to different countries, Brazil or something, you got paganism infused into the liturgy. But the only thing and in the Vatican, Francis had paganism, Pachamama, they had a pagan goddess of fertility, paraded in Rome, in the Vatican, in St. Peter's Basilica, in the churches. People worshipping this demon goddess in the Vatican gardens, bringing her images within the council halls. That's the single Roman rite, the fake Roman rite, which allows everything and every perversion and innovation, but the real apostolic rite of the Roman Church, not allowed. You see where this is going. All right, so let's start off step by step, because otherwise, well, whatever. So let's see what Benedict XVI himself in 7/7/2007. That was his motu proprio Summorum Pontificum, which basically said, yep, sorry, boys and girls, what you've been told since 1969 that it's been illegal to celebrate the ancient liturgy wasn't true. Actually, it was never juridically abrogated. As if anyone or any pope has that power, and nobody has. Watch my previous video on the subject because I go through a lot more. But anyways, I just want a few quotes. I want to go through this one a bit fast because there's a lot of sources. So, Benedict XVI says, look, I would like to draw your attention to the fact, it's not an opinion, that this missal was never juridically abrogated and consequently, in principle, was always permitted. Never, and he was the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for 1 billion years under John Paul II, and they had studies on it. I watched my previous video. I go actually 1987. They had a commission, or 1988 had a commission of cardinals which said it has never been abrogated. But they continued giving the illusion. Oh yeah, you need permission for something. Okay, a priest of the Roman Rite cannot celebrate the Roman Rite without permission. Oh yeah. Well, you need permission to celebrate the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, but not the real Roman Rite. Anyways, so and then Benedict XVI says, there is no contradiction. Okay, now this is the delusion. Now this is how Benedict put it, because he cannot out and out say, this is the new liturgy is a fabrication, which he said, and you will see. I will quote him for you. That's exactly what Benedict, when he was just Cardinal Ratzinger, denounced the liturgical deform. But of course, as Pope Benedict, he can't do that. Now, he should have done that, but he didn't. There is no contradiction between two editions of the Roman Missal. Well, why is Francis and his junta, Jorge and his junta, trying to destroy the real Roman Rite? They say there is a contradiction, because there is a contradiction. In the history of the liturgy, there is growth and progress, but no rupture. Now, this is actually true, because in Ratzinger's other quotes, he explicitly says there was a rupture with Paul VI's fabrication. He calls it a fabrication. So basically, this is true for the true Roman Rite, the real Roman Rite, the so-called Latin Mass. And actually, there's an article. It says it's not about Latin, and it's not about Latin. It is about the rite itself, the prayers, the ceremonies, the doctrine. It is not. Now, if there was just a straight English translation or a vernacular translation of the ancient Roman Rite, just plain translation of all the prayers as they are, as they stood, and allowing the Latin, there would be virtually no opposition to it, as long as sometimes you'd have the Latin language used, because the doctrine is maintained. Problem is, it is a complete fabrication. Complete fabrication. What earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred and great for us too, and it cannot. So it can't. No pope can do it. Be all of a sudden be entirely forbidden, or forbidden at all, in any case, or even considered harmful, which is what they're saying now. Oh, the pre-conciliar liturgy, the pre-Vatican II Mass is harmful. It creates schisms and divisions. But every paganization of the new Roman Rite is fine and dandy. You know, dancing girls, clowns, whatever. It's fine. Pagan goddesses, that's great. Adding voodoo rituals like in Brazil, that's fantastic. It's enculturation. But having the ancient liturgy, oh, that's harmful. But that's what they say. It behooves us, so it it behooves us, behooves all of us to preserve the riches. To preserve the riches which have developed into the church's faith and prayer, and to give them their proper place. So this is all about the ancient liturgy, which has no rupture, in contrast with the fabrication of Paul VI. So that was Benedict XVI's PP, which these two letters are never in Francis's letter. That's Pope and Pontiff. Because, he's just the Bishop of Rome. So that's Benedict. So it tells you exactly. Never abrogated, which is a fact. And you can't forbid a liturgical heritage, a treasure which it behooves us to preserve and foster, basically. So that was Benedict. So, and then you will see. So even in Francis's so-called motu proprio, he never actually abrogates the Missal of John the 23rd. He cannot abrogate the ancient Roman Rite. No pope can. Not Paul VI, not John Paul II, not Ratzinger, nobody. And I quoted in my previous video in Eusebius' Ecclesiastical History, which is like, you have to get that book. It's an ancient book. It talks about what Pope Saint Victor, a Pope Saint, not a Jorge Mario, okay, a Pope Saint Victor I, tried to get the bishops of Asia Minor, who have their own liturgical heritage from St. John the Apostle, to change only the day of celebration, not the rites and ceremonies and prayers and observances, just one day, the day of the resurrection. In Rome, it was celebrated on Sunday, on a certain calculation, on a Sunday. For them, the day of the resurrection was, I think, with the Jews, the 14th of Nisan or something. I can't remember. But basically, the day with the Jews, they would celebrate the Passover. Of course, the crucifixion and then the resurrection. It doesn't matter what day it was. Sunday, not Sunday, it doesn't matter. So Pope Saint Victor ordered them to observe the Roman custom. And they refused. And they told him, no, we did not innovate in anything. Contrast to what has been happening in the Catholic Church in the last 50 years. In anything, we have maintained what we have received. Exactly what St. Paul says. Maintain the traditions which you have received. And we refuse to that. We would rather obey God. They quoted St. Peter back to the successor of St. Peter. We'd rather obey God rather than men. We will keep observing what we have received. And Victor threatened them with excommunication, excommunicating almost a third of the church or half of the church if they would not observe his command. He is the vicar of Christ. Nobody disputed his universal jurisdiction, but they refused to obey something. So his not, as Benedict XVI says, the will of the Pope is not, the Pope is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. No, he is subject to tradition, he is subject to the faith, he is subject to the canons of the church, he is subject. He is subject to scripture. He is not a God walking God. He is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. No, his will is not law. He is subject to certain criteria. He is subject to apostolic tradition. He cannot override apostolic tradition. Anyways, so they refused. And St. Irenaeus, the disciple of St. Polycarp, the disciple of St. John the Apostle, supported them and interceded with the victor to back off. So yeah, a pope, just because a pope says something, doesn't mean, okay. Abandon all your apostolic liturgical traditions. All right. Adhere to a rite I invented out of thin air. Okay. No. You say no. You say no. Well, all right. So this is what Benedict said in his letter to the bishops. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's go to the next one here. And here's what, again, because this whole point of this motu proprio of Francis is to follow Vatican II and the decrees of Vatican II and to the liturgical reform of Vatican II. Well, let's see what actually somebody who participated in Vatican II, one of the prime periti experts of Vatican II at Vatican II, who had one of the most influential positions in Vatican II, was Father Joseph Ratzinger, with Karl Rahner and others. A real Vatican II man. What does he say about Vatican II? This is Cardinal Ratzinger's 1988 address to the Chilean bishops. Of course, he tries to... I'm going to just take... Not everything in it I agree with, like especially when he talks about Archbishop Lefebvre, which he's vindicated. Archbishop Lefebvre basically said exactly what Ratzinger is saying. But of course, again, as head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, of course, he has to maintain kind of a bit of a distance. So, again, this is an important part because you're going to hear what one of the main movers and shakers of Vatican II, who manipulated the council with others, Ratzinger, Joseph Ratzinger, has to say about Vatican II. And now he is the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Saint John Paul II. What does he say? Let's see. 1988, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. I'm not going through it. I'm just going to quote a few things. He just talks about, look, these people are like, oh, you're so nice to traditionalists. But the people who want more severe actions against the traditional Catholics are the ones who deny Catholic doctrine, and nothing is done for them, to them. That's what Ratzinger is saying. It is these people who have let no occasion slip to allow the world to know their disobedience to the Pope and to the magisterial documents of the last 20 years, who wish that an absolute obedience to the Vatican II has to be insisted upon. That is the same people running the church now. The same people. They disobey every doctrine. Even Vatican II has a ton of goods. Even Vatican II itself, I have a video, the one true church is the Catholic Church, or Vatican II says the church is the Catholic Church. Church of Christ is the Catholic Church. So Vatican II and the like the documents came after it. They reject all that. They reject a lot of Catholic teachings, but again, obey Vatican II. What do you mean by Vatican II? Oh, well, the spirit of Vatican II. Well, ignore the documents, ignore the letters, ignore the actual statements. Let's go with the spirit. And the spirit can contradict the letter. But that's what they want. So these are the people who obey Vatican II while we ignore magisterial teachings and disobedience to the Pope. But other than that, obey Vatican II, and you got to get these traditionals to obey to accept Vatican II, whatever that means. And the traditionals actually accept Vatican II way more than these innovators. But in reality, the only point which is affirmed. Okay, now he's talking about the agreement between Archbishop Lefebvre and Ratzinger. In reality, the only point which is affirmed in the agreement following, I have to do that because I've got my camera in front of me here. Following Lumen Gentium number 25 is the plain fact. It's the plain fact that not all the documents of the council have the same authority. Some have more, some have less. It's not like the Word of God. It's not divinely inspired by the Holy Spirit, as they attempt to tell us. Every reform after the council was inspired by the Spirit. Well, which Spirit are we talking about? Definitely not the Holy Spirit. While there are many motives that might have led the great number of people to seek refuge in the traditional liturgy, he says there's many motives, above all, doctrinal. Chief one is that they find the dignity of the sacred preserved there, which means they do not find the dignity of the sacred preserved in the fabricated novelty of Paul VI. That's exactly what it means. Of course, I'm just not going through the article, but you can find it yourself online and read the whole thing if you like. Okay, now this explains what the Francis of Rome, his ilk, his junta, and a great preponderance of world bishops and theologians believe. Certainly, there is a mentality of narrow views that isolate Vatican II, and which has provoked this opposition because they take it by itself. Ignore all the ecumenical councils, all the papal teaching, all the ordinary magisterium of the last 2,000 years, but let's just take Vatican II, even though it taught no doctrine. That isolates Vatican II, and which has provoked this opposition. There are many accounts of it which give the impression. Now there's lots of accounts which give the impression of what? From Vatican II onwards, everything has been changed, and that what preceded it, preconciliar, has no value, and at best has value only in the light of Vatican II, instead of Vatican II being understood in the light of all of tradition. So, I don't understand this part of Vatican II. It seems vague. It seems wrong. Well, let's see what the Church taught for 2,000 years, and then we can try to rightly understand that part, which is basically the hermeneutics of continuity of Benedict XVI. But these people, which are ruling now, they take Vatican II as everything changed at Vatican II. Okay. Everything that before Vatican II means nothing. We ignore it. Vatican II, we start from here and then do whatever we want, innovate. That's not Christianity. That is basically Protestantism. The second, now this is very, very important, the Second Vatican Council. This is Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, future Pope Benedict XVI. What does he say? The Second Vatican, prime mover and shaker at Vatican II, one of the main periti experts at Vatican II, participated at the council. So what does he say? The Second Vatican Council has not been treated as part of the entire living tradition of the Church, but as the end of tradition, a new start from zero. The truth is, so this is how they treat it. Everything before Vatican II means nothing. Means zero. Vatican II is start from zero. It is the new Pentecost. It's the new springtime. The truth is, for those who have ears to hear, for eyes to see, the truth is that this particular council, in contrast with every other council, the truth is that this Vatican II, particular council, Vatican II, defined no dogma at all. Defined no dogma at all. Nothing in Vatican II will affect what the church taught for 2,000 years. Because it defined no dogma at all. Defined no doctrine at all. And deliberately chose to remain on a modest level as a merely pastoral council. This is not some traditionalist saying that. Head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under John Paul II, participated in Vatican II, one of the prime movers and shakers at Vatican II, who had humongous influence at Vatican II. What does he say? People treat it as a start from zero, as a super dogma, he will say it, or did I code it already? No, he'll say. But in fact, the truth is of the matter, at this particular council, Vatican II, do you obey Vatican? Do you believe? Do you adhere to Vatican II? Yeah, sure, whatever. Do you accept Vatican II? Yeah, whatever. Sure, I accept Vatican II. I accept it. So when they asked tradition, do you accept Vatican II? Sure, I accept Vatican II. Well, it was convoked by a pope and bishops were there, so it's a valid council. But do you accept Vatican II? Yeah, sure. According to the understanding of each rank of each document, as Ratzinger says. Do you accept Vatican II? Sure, I accept it 100%, exactly like Ratzinger says, of the truth of this council, which is, at this particular council, Vatican II, which I accept fine, defined no dogma at all. So basically it doesn't affect my faith. And deliberately chose to remain on a modest level as a merely pastoral council. It is the lowest of the low. It is the least of all councils of the Catholic Church. Merely a pastoral council. And pastoral things can change. Well, we thought we should do that. No, pastorally, maybe you should do that now. Yeah, okay. And yet, so this merely pastoral council with defined no dogma or doctrine. So it's the least of all councils. Yet, many treated, including Francis of Rome and his ilk, they treat it as though it had made itself a sort of super dogma, when it defined nothing, which takes away the importance of all the rest. So, you accept Vatican II? Sure. Define nothing. Deliberately remained at a modest level as a merely pastoral council. Sure, I accept that. 100%, fine. Pastoral ideas of Vatican II could be changed because they define nothing. This idea is made stronger by things that are now happening. That which, again, this is what he said in 2007, freeing the ancient liturgy. That what is now happening, that which previously was considered most holy. What is that? The form in which the liturgy was handed down, not invented and fabricated, suddenly appears to be the most forbidden of all things. The one thing that can safely be prohibited. That's it. But allow every form of depravity and innovation and novelty. It's great and fantastic. The only thing which is safe to be prohibited is the thing which was considered the most holy, the divine liturgy. as handed down through apostolic tradition. That's the only thing you can safely forbid, and is dangerous. It is intolerable to criticize decisions which have been taken since the council, even though it was just merely pastoral. On the other hand, if men make question of ancient rules or even of great truths of the faith, for instance, the corporal virginity of Mary, the bodily resurrection of Jesus, the immortality of the soul, etc., nobody complains, or only does so with greatest moderation. I'll finish this quote. Well, you can read it. I'm not going to read the rest. So the only way in which to make Vatican II can be made plausible, the only way in which Vatican II can be made plausible, otherwise it's not plausible, it's a garbage bin of a council, is to present it as part of the unbroken unique tradition of the Church and her faith. And that's what he attempted to do under the term of hermeneutics of continuity. Because the only way to make Vatican II plausible is to say, look, it's only a part, and actually a small part, a merely pastoral council of the entire history of the Church. That's the only way to make it plausible. If you say, no, Vatican II, ignore everything else, then it's not plausible. It is the least of the least. It is nothing. It could be totally 100% ignored. In the spiritual movements of the post-conciliar era, there is not the slightest doubt that frequently there has been obliviousness or even a suppression of the issue of truth. Truth has no meaning these days. It's like, oh, what is truth? I don't know. Does it feel right? When one says something is true, it's true. Anyways. The truth is thought to be a claim to that. The truth is thought to be a claim that is too exalted, a triumphalism that cannot be permitted any longer. And that's why, for the last great while, truth has been, what is truth? Oh yeah, now there's a evolution of dogma. We ignore the meaning of dogma and teaching of the last 2,000 years. Now we understand that this way. Our new Eucharistic understanding is that. Our new understanding of the Church is this. Ignore truth. Truth is too. There's no such thing as truth. You're being triumphalistic. Well, yeah, we want to be triumphalistic because Christ is truth and he triumphs. It is, if we do not point, and this is absolutely true, and you should watch my video on Pope Francis, evangelization versus proselytism, because in it he basically abolishes truth, and he tells people, live nicely and don't proclaim the truth, don't debate, don't try to convince people to convert to the faith, don't debate ideas. That's proselytism. If you do not point to the truth in announcing our faith, and if this truth is no longer essential for the salvation of man, then the missions lose their meaning. The missions meaning, all the orders going to supposedly preach the gospel and convert people to the Christian faith, the true Christian faith, which is the Catholic faith. But if there is no truth, then they lose their mission. And that's why you saw the basically destruction of the missionary zeal. And what he condemns here is what is being promoted now. Christians should be good Christians. Muslims, good Muslims. Hindus, good Hindus. Yay! That's why they have the Abrahamic whatever this construction in Dubai or one of these Arabian countries of the Vatican, partnering up with Islamic countries, they're building in one site 3 temples, one for the Christian religion, one for the Jewish religion, and one for the Islamic religion, the Abrahamic religions. Oh, Christians can be good Christians, Muslims good Muslims, Jews good Jews, Hindus good Hindus. No truth, it doesn't matter. The idea that all religions are, if you talk seriously, only symbols of what ultimately is incomprehensible is rapidly gaining ground in theology. And that's in 1988. So what is the situation now? And has already penetrated into liturgical practices. This is the paganization of the liturgy. It is inculturation. When things get to this point, faith is left behind. Faith is left behind because faith really consists in the fact that I am committing myself to the truth. So this is Cardinal Ratzinger's address in 1988 to the Chilean bishops about Vatican II. You have to understand the documents according to their level of authority. And the whole council, top to bottom, first letter to last letter, alpha to omega, confined itself on a modest level as a merely pastoral council. Define no dogma or doctrine. That is when they hear, it's Vatican II, it is against Vatican II. Well, define nothing. Okay, sure, I'll accept whatever you said. And to show you that indeed Vatican II, even Cardinal Ratzinger, in his writings, he talks about it in his book, The Principles of Catholic Theology. He talks about the document Gaudium et Spes as a counter-syllabus. And that is the syllabus of modern errors of Pius XI. And he says here, let us content ourselves here with stating that the text of Gaudium et Spes always plays the role of a counter-syllabus to the measure that it represents an attempt to officially reconcile the Church with the modern world as it had become in 1789 after the French Revolution, the anti-Christian French Revolution. So the Church is attempting to reconcile itself with the I'm going to start closing tabs so I don't have a million things, but hopefully you remember what I said. With the anti-Christian French Revolution. Cardinal Ratzinger himself calls the document Gaudium et Spes a counter-syllabus of Pius XI. And that's a syllabus of errors. You should go over it. And like certain things might seem to us, oh, that's kind of weird. But you should just read it. Of course, it is errors, which meaning they are errors. They cannot be reconciled. Even like talking about, okay, yeah, you can't talk about Christianity being the only true religion. Whatever is. A man may, in the observance of any religion, whatever, find the way to eternal salvation and arrive at eternal salvation. That's one of the errors. So it's a whole bunch of errors. You can just go find something. The Roman pontiffs and ecumenical councils have wandered outside of their powers. They have usurped the rights of princes, so the governments, and have even erred in defining matters of faith and morals. That's another error. So we're having a counter-syllabus to this, because you will see Cardinal Dulles says, oh yeah, they screwed up in the past. Now we are rearranging, refixing things. So anyways, I'll let you go over it. I'm not going to go, it's not the point of it, but that's the syllabus of errors. If you know, what is he talking about, a counter syllabus? What is he talking about? That's what he's talking about. So you can go over it yourself. Now, Avery Dulles, he was a participant in Vatican II, cardinal, modernist, progressive, Catholic professor. Anyways, and this is what he said in his presidential address. I can't remember the exact date for it. But anyways, this is you can find this presidential address of Avery Dulles. And he talks about Vatican II here. Ignore that part. All right, let me just kind of move. Most important, I don't know if you can, I can't even highlight. It's basically this section here. Most important for our purposes, Vatican II quietly reversed earlier positions of the Roman magisterium on a number of important issues. So you reverse the teaching of the ordinary and thus infallible magisterium of the church. For example, are well known in the biblical studies, for instance, where is it? In the biblical studies, for instance, the Constitution of the Divine Revelation accepted the critical method to approach the New Testament, which is basically textual criticism, which basically denies divine revelation, which is false, because actually Vatican II itself talks about the scriptures being divinely revealed by the Holy Spirit and having God as the author, and so he's lying. But that's the impression, the spirit of Vatican II, that it destroyed the faith. But he's an expert, he's a cardinal, he must be telling the truth. But when you read the documents, you find he's a liar. But in other things, he's telling the truth. Biblical Commission. Again, it talks about the counter syllabus here of Pius XI's Mortalium Animus, and about the errors of the modern and religious freedom. What do you mean by religious freedom? I mean, error has no rights. I am not. God does not give me the right to worship the devil. God does not give me the right to sacrifice babies to demons. That is not my religious freedom. God doesn't give me the right to worship angels than the Creator. That's not a human right. So this is why you have to understand what you mean by the Church's freedom of religion. And then, as a result, these and other as a result of these and other previously official positions, the Council rehabilitated theologians who has suffered the severe restrictions. So people who were deemed heretical were rehabilitated because now their false teaching has been accepted. Anyways, so Cardinal Avery Dulles basically supports what Cardinal Ratzinger has just said of the counter syllabus, and what basically same thing is said by was told by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, not by him, but he was an expert at the council. He was one of the bishops at the council, and he reports it in his book Open Letter to Confused Catholics. It was Cardinal Suenens, one of the progressives at the council, who explained Vatican II is the French Revolution in the Church. And remember what Ratzinger said? That the Gaudium et Spes was a counter syllabus, and it tried to reconcile the Church to the world, which happened after the French Revolution. So Vatican II was the French Revolution in the Church. And among other unguarded declarations, he added, one cannot understand the French and Russian revolutions unless one knows something of old regimes, which they brought to an end. It is the same in the church affairs. A reaction can only be judged by the relation of the thing that preceded it. And why are you asking me, am I dwelling on this Vatican II for so long before going to the motu proprio, well, to the theme of this video, which is they hate the Latin Mass, the traditional Roman Rite, because they hate the Catholic faith. Because they will tell you the ancient liturgy is against Vatican II. Well, and against the reforms which emanated from the council. Well, if we understand the council then, and what it represents, then we can respond to these people. If you don't know they understand what it represents, and the authority of the merely pastoral, modest Council of Vatican II, as compared to everything else, you will not be able to respond to these people. Okay. Vatican II marked the end of an epoch. He continued, Cardinal Swen says, the Second Vatican Council marked the end of an epoch, and if we stand back from a little more back from it a little more, we see it marked the end of a series of epochs, the end of an age. Pierre Congar, one of the artisans of the Deform, spoke likewise. The Church has peacefully. The Church has had peacefully its October Revolution. What is the October Revolution? October 1917, the Communist Revolution in Russia. In 1976, Father Gelano, one of the liturgical experts, he had this to say: the reform decided on by Vatican II. It wasn't really, again, the Vatican II says restore to the certain things of the Roman Rite, pure, it didn't say give us a brand new liturgy, destroy the ancient rite. No, it's just edit it, make certain things more simplified. And actually, when you read it and you read what John the 23rd was talking about, there's identical verbiage when he talks about simplification of rites. He is talking about the simplification of the rubrics, not necessarily the prayers and so forth. The Sign of the Vatican was the signal for the fall. The entire structures have come crashing down. Make no mistake about it. The translation is not just to say the same thing in other words. It is a change in form. And actually, as I said, the new liturgical rites of all 7 sacraments are not simple translations. If they were simple translations, there would be still a desire for the ancient language because of the ancient heritage and the universality and the Gregorian chant which goes with it. But it would not be. The opposition would not be as bad because it is maintaining the same faith, the same liturgy, the same words, the same prayers. But it is not about Latin. It is about the entire rite which has been altered. If the form changes, and it has been changed, it has been demolished, the rite changes. Paul VI will call his fabrication the new rite. If one element is changed, the totality is altered. And it's just not one element. The whole thing was altered. One must be said without mincing words. The Roman Rite, as we used to know it, exists no more. The Roman Rite has been destroyed. And Ratzinger himself will echo the same thing. So this is, again, you see it. Ratzinger, Dulles, Cardinal Swenens, Yves Congar, Gelano, Marcel Lefebvre, all saying the same thing. Okay. Oh, so this brings us to the motu proprio of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, also known as Francis, Bishop of Rome, Traditionis Custodes. And we're not going to go through the actual motu proprio. We're going to go through his letter to the bishops. Not the whole thing, just a few little things. and why it has been written. The Mass, according to the Editio Typica of the Roman Missal, promulgated by John the 23rd, talking about the Mass of St. Pius, promulgated St. Pius V. St. Pius V, again, did not invent a new liturgy. It is the same Roman liturgy which was there from the 1000s and even before, up to, as Cardinal Burke says, even before Gregory the Great. It's the same Mass. He just standardized the Roman Missal for the Roman Diocese of Rome. That's it. He did not invent anything new. Unlike, the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI. And I keep on saying that because that's the words of our Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI. And I'll quote you again, Paul VI himself saying, this is a novelty and innovation and annoyance. A new rite as compared to the Roman rite. So it says, Benedict allowing the Mass according to the Editio Typica of the Roman Missal promulgated by Blessed John the 23rd in 1962 and never abrogated. So Francis himself repeats the very words of Benedict, has never been abrogated as the extraordinary form of the Roman liturgy. Now, I quote again, Benedict saying, well, clearly, people who celebrate this clearly accept the binding character of Vatican II and are faithful to the Pope and the bishops. Sure. We accept the binding nature of Vatican II according to the rank of the documents in doctrine, as I have quoted Ratzinger himself say. And we accept the binding character of Vatican II as restricting itself on a very modest level as a merely pastoral council that defined no doctrine or dogma. Sure, fine. But we reject it if you consider it a start from zero and as a super dogma and as everything went before it as of no meaning. We reject it if in your head, if in your mind, accepting Vatican II means rejecting everything in the past. And it's a start from zero and it's a super dogma. When in fact we accept Vatican II as a council which restricted itself on a modest level as a merely pastoral council which defined no doctrine or dogma. We accept it at that level. And he says, we send all this questionnaire to bishops asking about the situation of the liturgy of the Roman Mass, of the community celebrating the ancient rite. And Cardinal Zen said, I didn't get any letters. Nobody asked me. And he says, the responses reveal a situation that preoccupies and saddens me. It saddens him. You know why? Because of the growth of the ancient liturgy, of the flourishing of traditional communities, of the flood of vocations into traditional orders. What saddens him more is the growing rigidity of Catholics who want to adhere to the truth, as Cardinal Ratzinger says, to the truth of the faith, to the ancient liturgy, to the treasure, as Cardinal Ratzinger called it, of which has been handed down over the centuries. It saddens him because if you adhere to the truth and you adhere to the heritage of the past, instinctively you will find the GMO mass-produced fabrication of the new rite distasteful or tasteless. It's natural. You eat the free range eggs and then or the grass-fed beef, and then you compare them to the farmed eggs and the mass-produced grain, soy-eating beef, you get used to the good stuff. First, you're eating the not healthy stuff. You say, it's okay. It's kind of giving me some nutrition. When you get used to the good stuff, first it tastes a bit different. Then you enjoy it. You love it. And then when you get used to it, you try to eating the regular eggs or grain-fed beef. It's like, that kind of tastes different. It's kind of tasteless. I don't like it. normal, natural. By their fruits you shall know them. You will know it. And he says, Francis says, at the same time, I am saddened by the abuses in the celebration of the liturgy on all sides. And he's a liar. Let's be frank. He is a liar. He presided over pagan rituals in the Vatican when they brought the pagan goddess of fertility to Rome for the synod on the Amazon. They put pagan goddess paraphernalia in churches in Rome. And he was there. He participates in paganized liturgies in other countries. He promotes it. They want to fabricate an Amazonian rite. There's paganized liturgies all over Brazil and other countries. That's great. It's called enculturation. But adhering to the real Roman Rite, in its purity, the apostolic liturgy, oh no, that's bad. That's paganized ancient liturgies with Hindu rituals in India for enculturation. But adhere to the ancient liturgy. They are even attempting to subvert the ancient liturgy handed on by St. Thomas to the Indians. For those who are in communion with Rome, change your liturgy. Turn around, don't face east anymore. Modify it. Change it to follow the Latins, to follow our innovations. Reject the liturgy which came to you from St. Thomas. This is the hatred they have for the ancient liturgies, the ancient rites, because they convey the ancient faith. All right. So this is basically a bunch of lies here. Oh, yeah, I really don't like the abuses in the liturgy. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. I am nonetheless saddened that the instrumental use of the Missale Romanum of 1962 is often characterized by a rejection not only of the liturgical reform, because it's a deform, it's a fabricated liturgy. It's a banal on-the-spot fabrication, as Cardinal Ratzinger says. But of the Second Vatican Council itself, but of Vatican II itself. Well, we reject Vatican II if you consider it a super dogma, as it starts from zero, and that everything before it means nothing. If that's what you think of Vatican II, then of course we reject it. But we accept it, as Cardinal Ratzinger says, as a council which restricted itself as being on a modest level, as a merely pastoral council, which defined no dogma or doctrine. Sure, we accepted at that level, the true level, on the basis of truth, not a fantasy land of being a super dogma. Claiming with unfounded and unsustainable assertions that it betrayed the tradition of the true church. Well, if you want to alter, if you have a counter syllabus, meaning the tradition of the church. If you have bishops saying it is the French Revolution in the church, it's the communist revolution in the church, the new liturgical reform is the destruction of the Roman Rite. If you have Cardinal Dulles saying it reversed a lot of the ordinary magisterium of the Roman pontiffs, which are universal, ordinary, and if they are considered with all the teaching of the church of the past, they are infallible. So in that sense, it did betray the tradition of the church in certain parts. Or it has to be understood, saying things which are said. For example, on the question of religious liberty, it says it has to be restricted only for the public order. That's the criteria. But if you read the other documents of Vatican II, they talk about the government having to restrict not only public order, but the common good. And in the Compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which I did a 3-hour review of, I encourage you to purchase it, but they leave the part about the death penalty, which Francis inserted there. Again, it talks about the religious liberty under the restriction of the common good. Common good restricts the diffusion of error. And actually, it talks in the compendium talks about governments have to stop pornography, all kinds of errors and immorality for the common good. What about the destruction of the soul for the common good? So Vatican II, if you're just looking at the single document of religious liberty, only tries to restrict it on the auspices of public order, but not the common good, which is the main criteria which the church has always taught. If it's against the common good, you don't allow it. To doubt the council, as if to doubt the word of God, to doubt the existence of truth, to doubt that Jesus Christ is God, as Francis apparently told Eugenio Scalfari. I have a whole video going through all the interactions of Scalfari, which is an atheist, anti-Catholic Italian journalist, good friends with Pope Francis. They phone each other on the phone. They talk to each other on the phone. They go hang out. They hang out for coffee and tea. And Francis talked to Scalfari. I have the whole video. You should just watch it. Scalfari, and I think it says Jesus Christ is not God, Francis says, or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but you'll see the picture of Francis and Scalfari. And Francis denies the immortality of the soul, the eternity of hell. The last, up to the point I did the video, was in 2019, 2020. Francis basically told Scalfari, or Scalfari says that Francis told him, when Jesus left heaven, like the second person, he left his divinity in heaven. He became 100% human on earth, just human. And after his resurrection, he regained his divinity. So basically, Francis is denying the divinity. Jesus Christ walking on earth was God incarnate, because he left his divinity in heaven. So, but to doubt the council is to doubt the intentions of those very... Now we're going to read intentions. We're going to read minds here. That's what they talk about. The spirit of the council. The spirit of Vatican II. Well, it contradicts the words, but the words say this and this and that, as Benedict tried to do it throughout his career, and Cardinal Ratzinger, Joseph Ratzinger. Well, the council says A, B, C. But no, you ignore the words. Listen to the spirit. The intentions. We're going to be mind readers here now. To doubt the council is to doubt the intentions of those very fathers. Which very fathers? Those who formed the traditionalist group as well, who attempted to stop the innovations or reformulate them back to orthodoxy, who exercise their collegial power in a solemn manner, cum Petro et sub Petro, with Peter and under Peter. And actually, Paul VI himself, in an addendum to one of the documents, either Gaudium et Spes or another document I can't remember right now, because theologians and even bishops were asking him, how are we to understand these documents? How are we understand these statements? So Paul VI himself put it in, I don't have it in front of me at the moment. Where's my book, Vatican II? Anyways, it's in. I did it on a video and then I quoted it. But there's a section. I think under Gaudium et Spes, explains that what has been always repeated by the church, what has always been defined and taught, you accept. This is infallible. But anything which seems novel, you are not bound to accept it. So, yeah, sure. Under Peter, with Peter. Yeah, okay. And in the final analysis, to doubt the Holy Spirit himself who guides the church. So to doubt the council is to doubt God, the Holy Spirit, who guides the church. So the words of the council are the words of God. So for Francis, The words of the council, not actually even the words. The words don't matter because a lot of times the words contradict their actions and their beliefs. It is the intentions, the mind-reading intentions of listening to the Spirit. And we listen to it, to Him, we listen to the Spirit, and we interpret Him as we please. Oh yeah, the Spirit told me, the Spirit is guiding me now. I'm a walking God. So, we got the doubt, the council is down. Well, as I said, we quote Ratzinger. We accept the council as the council itself defined itself and restricted itself as on a modest level as a merely pastoral council that defined no doctrine or dogma. We accept it at that level. It's not the God's word. It's not the holy divine scriptures or the divine liturgy which comes to us from the apostles. The liturgy in all the ancient rites has more doctrine than all councils combined, because it is the prayer of the ancient fathers, the faith of the ancient fathers which comes to us. The liturgy is living tradition. The ancient liturgy is faith, scripture, and tradition. Scripture is known. Tradition, primarily. It's not just the writings of theologians and ancient doctors. The liturgy is one of the most prime sources of tradition. How you pray is how you believe. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. What did the ancients believe? Let's look at how they prayed. Let's look at their prayers. What do their prayers mean? What do they pass on? What do they teach these prayers? Oh, they teach this. They teach that. Well, that's exactly what we believe. But for the modernists, the heretics, the innovators, because they hate the faith, once for all delivered to the saints, they want to alter the liturgy, so they want to alter the faith. They can't just go and say, let's ignore it, let's completely alter the faith and keep the liturgy the same, because people will be praying. It's like, well, the liturgy says this and this and that, but you're telling me something different. But when you alter the liturgy over 50, 60, 70, 100 years, people's faith alters, changes. It won't be remembered what the true faith is anymore. And what does Francis continue to say? It must therefore be maintained that the Roman Rite, adapted many times. Now here's another lie of Jorge the liar, Francis the liar, the deceiver, the destroyer. Let's listen to the liar again. Francis the fabricator. It must therefore be maintained. Must it? That the Roman Rite, adapted many times, wasn't adapted, it was edited. Certain things were edited slightly. As one of the main worshippers of Francis will say, you'll see it soon. I'm going to read that again. It must therefore be maintained. No, it mustn't. That the Roman Rite, adapted many times over the course of the centuries, according to the needs of the day. According to the needs of the day. So basically what Francis is saying, well, over the centuries, the Roman Rite was altered and changed, to fit the needs of the day. Go with the wind of doctrine. Go with how the wind is blowing. Oh, well, today people don't believe that. Okay, let's change it. Oh, today is, people prefer this. Okay, let's alter it. That's what he's saying. To justify the fabrication of the Rite of Paul VI, the fake Roman Rite. But that is an absolute lie. All the writings of all the popes and all the fathers always maintained that one must adhere to tradition, that one must preserve what he has received, especially in the liturgy. And anything which grew over the centuries grew gradually, slowly, organically through faith. Not an expert committee came and altered everything. Not only, it must be therefore be maintained that the Roman Rite, adapted many times over the course of the centuries, according to the needs of the day, lie, not only be preserved, but renewed in faithful observance of tradition. Why? By altering tradition, you observe tradition. That's what they're telling you. He's quoting Vatican II here. Vatican II, faithful obedience to tradition. You observe tradition by observing the traditional rites. You don't alter them in the name of tradition. I'm going to tell the truth by lying. That's what basically he's saying. Which whoever wishes to celebrate with devotion according to the earlier forms of the liturgy can find in the deformed Roman Missal. According to Vatican II, actually according to Paul VI, Vatican II had the ancient rite still. According to the fabrication of Paul VI and Bonini. All the elements of the Roman Rite. Oh, the elements, but not the prayers, not the ritual, not the devotions, nothing. Just a few elements here and there of the Roman Rite. In particular, and actually he's quoting here Paul VI, which we're going to see his quote again. In particular, the Roman canon. Okay, yay! We destroyed the whole Roman Rite, but we left you the canon. And even the Roman canon was slightly altered. The Roman canon is the most ancient part of the liturgy. And it's so beautiful. It talks about Melchizedek and Abraham and the sacrifice and Abel. It's a treasure. The most ancient part of the Mass is the Roman canon, which is said silently, not silently, very low tone of voice by the priest. So only those really close to him can hear him say it. And why say, it should be said aloud, the people need to hear it. Well, the people can read it in their missals. People know it. They want to follow it, they can follow it. They don't need to hear it. And that is ancient tradition. And in the Eastern rites, the Armenian and several other Eastern rites, Ethiopic, when the priest is consecrating, when he's going into the canon, into their version of the canon of the Mass, where the consecration happens, the priest goes into the Holy of Holies, and the curtains are pulled closed, and they can sing songs outside, chanting, but the priest himself inside is reciting the canon in a sense, silently, because they can't hear it. Behind the curtain, even closed curtain. I think the Copts keep the curtain open, but I believe the Ethiopians and others, the rites which come to India from St. Thomas and others, completely close the curtains. And the Armenian close the curtains while the consecration is happening. And when the consecration is done, the curtains are open. The gates of heaven, the temple veil has been opened, and he comes out with the bread of heaven. This is tradition because the temple, the ancient liturgies are based upon the temple, upon the ancient liturgies of God. Upon the temple architecture, there's the Holy of Holies. Watch my first video on the Latin Mass. Then there's the holies. Then there's the court of the men and the court of the women, because the women would sit on one side, the men would sit on the other side. All comes to us, and we have the priesthood, the high priesthood, the priesthood, the diaconate as the Levites who are helping the priests in the ancient temple. It is not based upon the Passover meal. No. It's based upon the ancient sacrifice, and the sacrifice of the cross is the accumulation, is the fulfillment, is the reality of all the symbols, the mirrors, of all the sacrifices of the temple. So the Roman canon is said silently, exactly like all the ancient churches, East and West. So anyways, it's okay. Let's see what he has to say. The liturgical books promulgated by the saintly pontiffs Paul VI and John Paul II, saintly. He made them saints, and now we have a legitimate. One would say, the canonizations are infallible. Yeah, well, they used to be, because it was extremely hard to be declared a saint. They had John Paul II simplified the canonization process to such an extent. No more presenting evidence against a possible saint, reducing the number of miracles. They made it a Mickey Mouse a mixed saint factory. A mixed saint factory. That's why there was an explosion of saints suddenly out of nowhere. Everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry is a saint nowadays. Easy to become a saint. Before, when somebody is declared a saint, whoa, that took a while. That took an investigation. Doesn't mean the new saints are not in heaven, but they are not to be ranked. They are not in the same category of holiness of those saints of past. Anyways, so when there's a mixed saint factory, well, I was like, I don't know, is this like even real meat anymore? I don't know, is this a real saint? I don't know. You're causing doubt. And Paul VI, the destroyer of the Roman Rite, if he's in purgatory, he'd be lucky. All right. In conformity with the decrees of Vatican II, of course, again, that's another lie, because Vatican II said to preserve all the rights of the church, East and West, to foster them, to preserve them, to preserve the Latin language. That's what Vatican II said. But no, to restore them according to the pristine norms of the Holy Fathers, not to fabricate a brand new liturgy and destroy utterly the ancient rites. But that's what happened. Conscious of the unique, that the fabricated liturgy, the fake Roman Rite, the liturgical innovation of the new Rite, as Paul VI himself called it, is now constitutes the unique, the only expression of the Lex Orandi, the law of prayer, the only expression of the law of prayer of the Roman Rite. Which means that this is the only way, that means that the Lex Orandi, the law of prayer of the pre-conciliar, the pre-Vatican II Missal, the real Roman Rite, does not express the law of prayer, the way you pray, is not express the Roman Rite or the teaching of the, because it's a double expression. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi, the law of prayer, the law of belief. Now he's saying there, the only law of prayer is the new Missal, because it will reflect a law of belief. He is refusing the law of prayer of the ancient Missal, the ancient Rite, the real Roman Rite, because it will reflect a law of belief which he rejects. That is the reason for saying, it's the only expression of the Roman Rite. The fabricated liturgy, the novelty, is the only expression of the new Rite, of the fake Roman Rite, of the Rite of Paul VI. The real expression of the real Roman Rite is the ancient liturgy. I take comfort. Now here's another big fat lie of the big fat liar, Francis. I take comfort in this decision from the fact, again, it's a big lie, because, when you're lying so much, just repeat a lie and people will believe it. From the fact that after the Council of Trent, St. Pius V, also, as if he's equating himself with what Pius V did, also abrogated all the rites. That, again, he's giving the impression that he abrogated the ancient Roman Missal. He didn't. There's not one word in the motu proprio abrogating anything. Okay? But again, this is like the devil. He's a deceiver. He uses words to give the impression. Vatican II gives the impression that the Catholic Church is no longer the only Church of Christ. Vatican II gives the impression that you have the right to worship demons. Vatican II gives the impression that you can, destroy the ancient liturgy, the ancient rites of the church. But it's not the fact. So he says, I comfort myself, I'm just like Pius V, the same Pius V. I'm just like him, we're cut from the same cloth, After the Council of Trent, Pius V also abrogated all the rites that could not claim a proven antiquity, establishing that the whole Latin Church a single Missale Romanum. Now, first of all, this word also is the lie part. Because what Pius V did was say, look, this is the newly edited Roman Missal. All priests of the Western Church, the Latin West, have freedom to use that missal if they so desire. And what he abrogated, what he forbade, was any, which is true, what Francis he says, because you mix truth with lies, like you mix poison in a beautiful, tasty cake, and tell them, oh, eat the cake. It has poison in it. So the truth is, yes, he abrogated, he forbade the liturgies which, as he says, could not claim proven antiquity. And what was the limit? Pius V said any liturgy of any church, or because at that time there was a variety of rites or uses of the Roman Rite, slight modifications, more prayers, more different things, which couldn't prove antiquity of 200 years. So if your liturgy was like, okay, it was invented 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, no, you can't use that. If you have an older version of your liturgy, fine. Or you use the Roman Missal, as I'm giving it to you now. But if your liturgy is older than 200 years, absolutely, you are free to use it. So, and why did he do that? Because the errors, the Protestant errors and heresies regarding the Mass, the liturgy, the meaning would have crept. He wanted to avoid any creeping novelty into the liturgy. He wanted a pure liturgy, free from heretical errors and modifications and novelties and innovations. That's what he said. It has to be older than 200 years. You can keep it. And his missal was ancient. It is an edited version of the same missal of the Roman Curia. Now, what Francis is giving impression to, look, I'm like St. Pius V. I'm abrogating, which he never did. You read the motu proprio, there's no abrogation of nothing. And no pope, not a saint pope, can ban an ancient liturgy, an apostolic rite. Saint Victor I in 190 could not force the Asian bishops who have their tradition from St. John the Apostle to alter the day of celebration of the Easter. Not the liturgy, the day of celebration, that's it. Do your own rites. Just change the day. They said, no, we can't even change the day. We're not allowed to. This is an apostolic tradition. But what Francis is saying, see the deception. I don't know if you noticed the deception. The deception is, well, Pius V banned, abrogated new, novel, innovative rites who could not prove their antiquity. But I, Francis, I'm attempting to abrogate, ban, suppress the most ancient rite, the Roman Rite, which goes to St. Gregory the Great and even prior. I want to ban that most ancient rite in favor of the novelty, the innovation, the invention, the fabrication, which came out 50 years ago in 1970. So I'm trying to suppress the real Roman Rite, the most ancient liturgy, and propagate in favor of a novelty, an innovation created out of thin air 50 years ago. Exact opposite of what Pius V did. And as I said, it is a matter of doctrine. So that is what Francis has to say. Now, we are almost done. All these tabs are related to doctrine. But, all my videos are very long. And I know they are very long. I can't do little snippets. You can watch a bit, go back and continue it, go back and continue it. you have to kind of go through the whole thing to get my point. I can't do a little 5-minute clip, which I probably can get 10,000 views on it, or 50,000 views if I do a 10-minute summation. But that's just meaningless, because you won't get the full meaning, the full rationale. All right, so we go back now, we reach the point. Actually, maybe before we deal with that, because he will name names here, and you will see them. You will see them, what they say explicitly. It's a matter of doctrine. That's why they hate the Roman Mass. Francis himself just said it. Lex Orandi, because he says he's skipping the rest of the statement, the Lex Credendi. The law of prayer is the law of faith. And the law of living. Lex Vivendi. Because how you believe is how you live. If you don't believe the Catholic Church is the only true church anymore, well, why stay in it? Let me go be Orthodox. And as I tell some people you gotta go be Orthodox now. My ancestors, of course, were all Catholics at the beginning of the one undivided church. Then over the centuries, because I'm born in the East, my ancestors are from Syria and Lebanon. Just by the matter of geography, they just didn't change anything. They just found themselves to be out of communion with the Bishop of Rome. And then they re-established communion with the Bishop of Rome. But they maintained their liturgical heritage. But as I said, for the most part attended the Traditional Roman Rite, because unfortunately there isn't I do love the Ancient Roman Rite. So he will deal with doctrine here. And I'm going to go through a lot of these. Maybe I will just go quickly through some of the scriptures. What Francis wants us to believe of the intentions of the fathers of Vatican II as the infallible word of God, the Holy Spirit, above the scriptures themselves. Because for him, truth, scripture, doctrine, dogma is rigidity. Pelagianism, which he apparently doesn't understand what it means. Pelagius said, you don't need grace, you can reach salvation with your own efforts. That's what it wasn't adhering to faith, to doctrine, to dogma. But that's the, again, lie of Francis. He's a non-stop liar. So I'll do actually maybe the scriptures, do quickly quotes, boom, 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 remove the tabs, and then finish up with some of the quotes so you understand. It is a matter of faith here we're dealing with. It is a matter of faith. That is why they hate the ancient liturgies of the church. East and West. East and West. That's why it saddens me to see, say, the Chaldeans from Iraq reforming, modernizing their liturgies. And now they face the people, they do things audibly, they change certain prayers. Why? To imitate the novelties of the West. The same thing with the Maronite Catholics, the Maronite Church. Why? Maintain your tradition. Follow Vatican II. Accept Vatican II, which called that the Eastern churches treasure their heritage to return to their apostolic traditions and remove Latinizations. But they do the exact opposite. Pretty soon, if this continues, the only Eastern rites which maintain for the Byzantines, it's a much better situation. Eastern Catholic Byzantine rites, for the most part, they maintain their liturgies. But if this continues for much longer, you'll find that the only group churches maintaining the apostolic rites in their integrity are the Orthodox, whether Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox, which is It's great that they're maintaining it, but it's a shame, it's a scandal that the Catholic Church, which always, up to the 1960s, always talked about preserving, protecting, not innovating, maintaining the liturgies as they have come down to us, is the prime mover and shaker in all the innovations and not having ancient liturgies. That's why the triumph of the ancient Roman Rite, the restoration of the ancient Roman Rite throughout the church, will lead to the restoration of some of the Eastern rites who are gradually drifting, going in the same way of destruction of the Latin Church. So let's actually go quickly, because I'm actually getting a bit of a headache from talking so much. But let's go quickly through the scriptures and then go finalize, see again their own words accusing them. And Cardinal Father Bart does, this is a matter of doctrine. They hate the Mass because it is doctrine. They hate the doctrine which the Mass, the ancient rite, passes on. That's why they want to remove it. That's why they want to destroy it. Let's go quickly through the scriptures and then finish up. All right, so from the Acts of the Apostles, what the early Christians do. What did the early Christians do? And they were preserving in the doctrine of the apostles and the communication of the breaking of the bread and in prayers. So in the doctrine, in the liturgy, and in prayer. Doctrine of the apostles, not any doctrine. St. Paul to the Romans, chapter 16. Now I beseech you, Romans, brethren, to mark them who make dissensions and offenses contrary to doctrine, which you have learned. So the traditional apostolic doctrine, not novelties, and avoid them. To the Galatians, St. Paul. But though we, an apostle chosen by God himself, Jesus Christ, but though we or an angel from heaven preach a gospel to you besides that which we have preached to you. So even if I, an apostle, or an angel from heaven comes to you and tells you, well, you know what I taught you before, kind of like, let's modify that. Let's renovate it. Let's reform it with a new understanding. Preach to you another gospel, which we are other than what we have already preached to you. Let him be anathema. So St. Paul is anathematizing himself if perchance he would teach them something different than what he already taught them. And he repeats it, as we said before. So now, I say again. God himself says again, because this is divine scriptures. If anyone, so he says, me, an apostle, one of the two apostles chosen by God himself. Anyone, that wouldn't include a pope, preach to you a gospel besides that which you have received, let him be anathema. That is St. Paul to the Galatians. Let's go ahead to the Ephesians now. So we saw Romans, Galatians, Ephesians, Acts of the Apostles. That henceforth and that's going to us. We should not go like, hey, well, that's what they say now, so let me follow. Oh, no, that's what they say this. Okay, let me follow. That's being a sheep. That's not being steadfast in faith. Then henceforth we be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about by with every wind of doctrine. Oh yeah, they taught you that that's preconciliar dogma. That's preconciliar doctrine. Now, the Vatican II understanding is blah, blah, blah. That's called wind of doctrine. That's called the new gospel. That henceforth we be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the wickedness of men, by cunning craftiness, by which they lie in wait to deceive. To deceive, because if you change the doctrine, you are a deceiver. St. Paul to Timothy, a bishop. Timothy is a bishop now. He's telling Timothy, what is he telling a bishop to do? Take heed to thyself and to doctrine. Doctrine is important, Francis. Doctrine is very important because it conveys truth. Who is Christ? We have to maintain truth. And as Conrad Ratzinger, if there is no truth, then all the missions mean nothing. If all religions are kind of the same thing, going to the same direction, then truth means nothing. St. Paul says, God says through St. Paul, take heed to thyself and to doctrine, be earnest in them. For in doing this, thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. So by adhering to doctrine, you will save yourself and to those who hear you. So if you don't adhere to doctrine, you condemn yourself and you condemn those who hear you. Let's go with the exact opposite. Again to Timothy, second letter. For there shall be a time, and that's always been throughout the history of the church, all the various heresies, but never, never, ever as what we are living through these days. This apostasy, this global heresy. For there shall be a time when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own ears, they will heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. I don't like hearing this hard, rigid doctrine. I don't like hearing about truth and error, right and wrong, moral and immoral, virtuous and impious. I don't want to hear any of that. This is non-loving. This is rigid. This is not the spirit of the Council, the spirit of Vatican II. This is not what the church of today teaches. I want to hear words which make me happy, which comfort me in my sin, like Amoris Laetitia, which comfort me, telling me, okay, you're living in an objective state of fornication or adultery, but you feel okay about it. That's fine. Your conscience is telling you it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. You can go to confession with no intention of changing your life. That's fine. You can come to Holy Communion, eat and drink judgment upon yourself, as St. Paul says. That's great. That's fine. It's okay. These are the opinions of a rigid man, St. Paul. Ignore them. We're a loving church now. Ignore that. Oh yeah, I love hearing this new teaching of the merciful Pope and the merciful Church. And will indeed turn away from hearing the truth. They will turn away from hearing the truth, but will be turned unto fables. Fables. They reject the truth. What's the alternative? Fantasy land. But be thou vigilant. Be, all of us, vigilant. Labor in all things. Do the work of an evangelist. Fulfill thy ministry. Be sober. St. Paul. St. Paul to Titus, another bishop. But speak thou the things that become sound doctrine. Like, how many times do we have to emphasize the importance of doctrine? Because it is the doctrine of the apostles. They were talking about that in Acts of the Apostles. St. John, second letter, chapter 1, it says, whosoever, doesn't matter who, the rank in the church or anything, whosoever revolteth and continueth not in the doctrine of Christ, in the doctrine of Christ, hath not God. They don't have God. Whosoever revolts against the doctrine of Christ doesn't have God. He that continueth in the doctrine, those who are rigid, who adhere to doctrines and dogmas and formulations of the church and definitions, the rigid bad ones, the preconciliar rigid ones. So those who continue within the doctrine, the same hath both the Father and the Son. So if you adhere to the faith once for all delivered to the saints, to the doctrine taught by the church for 2,000 years, to the definitions and decrees of the infallible councils, to the teaching of the popes, the infallible ordinary magisterium of the papacy, of the popes throughout the centuries, then you adhere to the doctrine of Christ, and you have both the Father and the Son, because you listen to the Holy Spirit. If any man, no exceptions to the rule, come to you and bring not this doctrine, this particular doctrine, receive him not into your house, nor say to him, God speed you. That's the apostle of love, St. John, the apostle. Now here's a letter of St. Jude, which I always repeat, chapter 1. I was under a necessity to write to you, so I felt compelled, and we are in this same situation now, to beseech you to contend earnestly for the faith once delivered to the saints. Some translations has say once for all delivered to the saints. That's it. That faith which was once delivered. And I think in one of the articles in the Vatican website or something says, I can't remember who was saying it, whether Pope Francis or one of his cohorts. He says, some people believe that the faith was just once delivered. That's it. It stopped. Yes. Yeah. The faith, that's called the deposit of faith. It was once delivered. That's it. No more revelations by listening to the Spirit and changing the faith. Once delivered. That is called novelty. That is called heresy. That's called a different gospel. I was under a necessity to write unto you, to beseech you to contend earnestly for the faith once delivered to the saints. For certain men have secretly entered in, who were written of long ago unto this judgment, ungodly men turning the grace of our Lord God into righteousness. Oh, you're living in a state of sin, Amoris Laetitia, that's okay. You are engaged in a sin which cries to heaven for vengeance and which God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for, but you have a loving relationship. Who am I to judge, man? Who am I to judge? Live your life. If you love God, live your life. Who am I to judge? I'm nobody. Who have turned the grace of our Lord God into righteousness and denying the only sovereign ruler and our Lord Jesus Christ. So that is St. Jude. I'm not going to repeat what I said. That's what God says. God. Vatican II is not God. The writings of Vatican II are not divine scriptures. All right. How am I going to go through this now? Let's see here. Okay, actually I will again come to this article. Shouldn't have too much longer, I hope, because honestly I'm getting a bit tired. Mr. YouTube guy is getting a bit tired. But what do we have to do? Be calm and carry on. Be calm and carry on. But not calm and relaxed, but vigilant and tough. Tough and calmness. Determined, but calm. We can't lose like you wanted to ban it? Yeah, sure. Go away. We'll continue celebrating the ancient liturgy. All right, so actually, you know what? Before we get into this part, because I kept on saying, Cardinal Ratzinger said, call it the fabricated liturgy. Cardinal Ratzinger said, it's an innovation. Well, you know what? Let's finish. Okay, yeah, let's do it. So anyways, again, I did a video on this, and I'll show you. Actually, maybe I'll just show you the little clip here. Is it a clip? No, not that one. Here. Annibale Bonini. I reviewed this book. And it's a very mild criticism, but it's actually describes what happened in the destruction of the Roman Rite. Annibale Bonini. And I have here a quote of what Cardinal Ratzinger says about this, the liturgical deform. About the liturgical deform. So I encourage you to watch this video. And this is another video which I did, like I said, I think I called it, Novus Ordo Mass, neither Catholic nor Apostolic. And we're going to go through slightly. In it, I talk about the two letters, two addresses of Paul VI himself in 1969, I believe, talking about the new Mass. He calls it a liturgical innovation of the new rite. He calls it a novelty. He calls it annoying. He calls it going to disturb souls. He calls it a new rite. He contrasts this with the Roman Rite. Like, these are the words of the Pope who brought us the liturgical deform himself, calling it a new rite, a novelty, and innovation. What more do you want? But anyways, if you want to follow this, I was ranting and raving here, like on this video, kind of like today. So I didn't actually put the thing on video, but I put the links to both letters here. So you can go actually read the two links for the words of Paul VI himself, what he said. Again, in the promo, unlike at this part, I'm actually quoting what Cardinal Ratzinger himself said. And actually here I quote the Knights of Malta, who, remember Francis kicked out basically Cardinal Burke out of the Knights of Malta. And then the Knights of Malta rejected the real Roman Rite, and they themselves adapted the deformed liturgy, and they called it, the Knights of Malta themselves called it the Rite of Paul VI. They adapted the Rite of Paul VI, which is the accurate description, because it is not the Roman Rite. It's the Rite of Paul VI. So this one has, so as I said, Cardinal Ratzinger wrote a full introduction to the book by Monsignor Klaus Gamber, The Reform of the Roman Liturgy, Its Problems and Background. But this introduction was written for the French edition of the book, not the English edition. So here in this website, I'm not going to put you the link, you can search for it. But that's the full preface, a long introduction. And there's the English translation. Now, this is the French, and then there's the English. So I'm just going to show you again, in 30 Days magazine, it's like the Mass turned into a show. Again, they have a certain part of that, the Mass reduced to a show, by Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. And basically, this is the full summary of what I'm going to quote you now. So again, I'm going to let you do that. Let's go with the actual, like the point of what I've been repeating over and over again. This comes again from the Reform of the Roman Liturgy of Monsignor Klaus Gamber in the French edition. Cardinal Ratzinger, head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, had this to say. That's in the preface to the French edition. What happened after the council was something entirely different. He contrasted, remember his talk, which I quoted at the beginning of his letter to the bishops, that the liturgy grew organically over the centuries, in contrast with what happened after the council, was something entirely different. In the place of a liturgy, the fruit of development came fabricated liturgy. We abandoned the organic living process of growth and development over the centuries and replaced it, the real liturgy, as in a manufacturing process, with a fabrication, a banal on the spot product. So we replaced the real liturgy with the fabrication, a banal on the spot product. And this is a falsification. And what's happening now is a continued revolution. And he quotes this, in the end, we will, in the end, Where is it? Oh, here, this is the important part. The pastoral benefits that so many idealists had hoped the new liturgy of the new rite would bring did not materialize. Our church is emptied in spite of the new liturgy. Or is it because of it? It's actually because of the new liturgy. Our church is emptied. And the faithful continued to fall away from the church in droves. And again, Mr. Cardinal Ratzinger says, in the end, we will all have to recognize that the new liturgical forms, well-intentioned, he has to say that, I guess, as they may have been, their intention was to make the liturgy more Protestant, to make it more agreeable to our separated brethren, so they will not find the content of the traditional Roman Rite offensive to their doctrinal aberrations. And that's admitted by the fabricator of the fake Roman Rite, Annibale Bonini. All right? Himself, he says that. So no matter how well-intentioned the destroyers of the Roman Rite might have been at the beginning, did not. So basically, in the end, we will have to recognize that the new liturgical forms, well-intentioned, blah, 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 did not provide the people with bread, but with stones. Harsh words from Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, head of the congregation for the doctrine of the faith. That is what he says. Okay, now let's get into this article. Hopefully, you're still with me here. And if I don't mention it at all, I hope you guys subscribe to the channel. Hey, I need to get up to 10,000 subscribers. We're kind of stuck just below 3,000. Come on, man. Come on, man. All right, that's okay. That's enough of that. Okay, let's go into this article which started this whole thing. Because this explains, as I quoted Francis himself saying, it's the only law of faith, of prayer, because it'll affect faith. Because faith and prayer and faith go together. Prayer affects faith. So we don't want the law of faith of the Old Mass, because it will affect the doctrine. This is an interview with Father Claude Barth, who organizes the Summorum Pontificum pilgrimages to Rome every year. And apparently this year, in October, it's still scheduled for a descent of these rigid traditionalists with Archbishop Cordileone of San Francisco celebrating the real Roman Rite in Rome. Unless Francis goes nuts and tries to ban it. We'll see what happens. So Father Claude Barth, the main chaplain of the Summorum Pontifical Pilgrimage. I'm going to just read you it's a translation of an article, interview they did with a French magazine titled A New Liturgical War, and they started the war, and we will finish it. And the end of the war, it'll be the end of the fake Roman Rite. Because there is no compromise now. That's it. We're done. We're done with, I will, as I said, go to the Novus Ordo if I have no other option. Because luckily, I have a couple of churches where the liturgy is celebrated with a relative level of decency and reverence. So, but it needs to be eliminated. The ancient rite, the real Roman rite, needs to be restored. As the real Chaldean rite needs to be restored. As the real Maronite rite needs to be restored. All right. So, liturgical war they want, a liturgical war they will get. He says basically the Secretariat of State led this effort to attempt with the motu proprio and to ban the ancient liturgy very discreetly. They did it on the lowdown. You can read the article yourself. I'm just giving you the highlights. The decision was made by the Pope that by those who lobbied him to take it. especially the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, the substitute Cardinal Peniapara, and Cardinal Versaldi, and others. And he basically, the article in English, he says like it's the Italian bishops and cardinals who were the origins before the motu proprio. I'm pretty sure Francis hated the ancient liturgy from the beginning. He destroyed the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate because they were growing, expanding, being vibrant, being strong in faith and morals, and they were adhering, gradually going from the new rite into the real Roman rite. He could not abide by it. He destroyed them. A Franciscan order. And his name is Francis. His hatred was manifest from day one. For those with eyes to see. Alright, so... and he says, how did the supporters of Francis motu proprio win through? So the major lobby group in the Italian Bishops' Conference was set against Summorum Pontificum of Benedict XVI, mainly because in Italy, rather later than in France, young priests were beginning to celebrate the traditional Mass and to adopt more traditional ideas. That made them very concerned. Very concerned. Oh my God! Young priests are actually wanting to celebrate, even on occasion, the ancient liturgy of Rome, and they are actually adhering to more traditional ideas, meaning the doctrine of the faith as handed down for 2,000 years. That is scary stuff, and that is what saddened Francis. Saddened him. Oh my God, these people are like becoming Catholic again. What the hell? What are their arguments for questioning Benedict XVI's documents? So, in the blog, he quotes this Andrea Grillo, which I did find his blog. And it's like, in Italian, you can press the auto-translate and go over his manure. But anyways, so, and this guy apparently has massive influence in Rome and in the Vatican. And an ardent hater of the ancient liturgy. Therefore, an ardent hater of the ancient Catholic faith. And he actually says that pretty much. They can also be found, so he says basically these cardinals and bishops, Italian Bishops' Conference, and then Andrea Grillo, or Grillo, whatever, however you pronounce the name, a lay professor of liturgy. The liturgical innovators like that damned Annibale Bonini, professor of liturgy. All right. Professor of Liturgy of St. Anselm's, who has been extremely hostile to Summorum Pontificum. His ideas taken up by the Pope and the crafters of the recent motu proprio is that, so what's his ideas? The traditional Mass represent a state of doctrine prior to Vatican II, while the new Mass represents the doctrine of Vatican II, something we already knew. And that's what actually has been condemned, even here. The Ottaviani intervention. The head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Holy Office, who wrote to Paul VI, just basically about the introduction of the new fabricated liturgy, that it is anti-Catholic. It goes against the doctrines of Trent. From way back when. And remember, now look how they frame it, the doctrine of Vatican II. And what did the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for 1 billion years, Cardinal Ratzinger and then Benedict XVI, say? In a Pariti at Vatican II, one of the main movers and shakers at Vatican II, what did he say about it? He said, Vatican II itself restricted itself to be on a modest level as a merely pastoral council. And we went through that and defined no doctrine or dogma. So they are inventing doctrines of Vatican II. Define nothing. It is as good as nothing. It is a pastoral council. And the pastoral orientations of the council could be altered any day, any time. It is the least of all councils of the church. So here he is, this Grillo guy, Andrea Grillo, says, and this is the belief of Francis himself, as you saw, the Lex Orandi, the only way of prayer is the new missal, because it has the law of belief follows the law of prayer. We can't have a law of prayer of the ancient mass because it has the law of belief of the ancient faith. That is why. I'll read this part again. His idea is taken up by the Pope and the crafters of the recent motu proprio is that the traditional Mass represents a state of doctrine prior to Vatican II. The new Mass represents the doctrine of Vatican II, something we all already knew. So as if doctrine can change, dogma can change. Cannot. If there's a contradiction, then we go with the ancient, with the tried and true, with the apostolic instead of with the new. So the main reason is doctrinal. Yes, and it is very important to say this and be aware of it. And he says, this puts the finger on what hurts, namely the doctrinal state of Vatican II, which has never been settled. Well, Father Bart, Cardinal Ratzinger in 1988 specifically said that Vatican II restricted itself on a modest level as being a merely pastoral council that defined no doctrine. That's the doctrinal state of Vatican II. No doctrine. It's a pastoral council, pastoral orientations. Then he continues. How does this motu proprio affect the Ecclesia Dei communities? If you can call them still that. Because what happened was when in 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated 4 bishops, some priests of his orders, Society of St. Pius X, decided, no, we can't take that one step. We'll go to Rome. And they went, met Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope John Paul II. And they said, we want to stay in full communion with the church, but we want to adhere to the ancient faith, ancient liturgy. And we have problems with a lot of certain documents of Vatican II, certain statements. We want to have the freedom to discuss them in a respectful way. Pope John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger said, go ahead. They gave them jurisdiction. They gave them not jurisdiction, but they allowed them to form their own seminaries, religious orders, go into all the dioceses of the world. Under that and under the protection of a commission, they call it the Ecclesia Dei Commission, based upon Pope John Paul's letter Ecclesia Dei at Flicta, at the consecration of the bishops. And then later on, this Ecclesia Dei Commission, basically as a protection for them, because they are not part of the regular congregation for religious and orders and whatever, because they have their unique situation, and John Paul II wanted to protect them, give them that freedom which is agreed upon, which is their basis of their regularization. Okay, so then I think either Benedict XVI at the end of his reign, if he actually resigned, before he renounced the active exercise of the ministry, or was it under Francis? I can't remember now. They moved the Ecclesia Dei Commission into the Department of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And now with this motu proprio, Francis says, hey, no more Doctrine of the Faith, no more Ecclesia Dei Commission. These guys go under the Congregation for Religious, who destroyed the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate, who destroyed some traditional monasteries, and leave them at the mercy of this congregation. It's dangerous, dangerous times. And how will these traditional orders react? Will they say, well, this is our constitution, this is what we were given by the Pope, and we'll adhere to it, because they will be attacked. Let's see how they react. He says about these ecclesiae, they were like the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, the Institute of the Good Shepherd, the various monasteries and orders. They will also be at the crosshairs, that's for sure. And what is the purpose of this motu proprio? It is a question of destroying the traditional celebration of the Mass by ensuring there will be no more priests to celebrate it. That's the whole point of this whole motu proprio. It's the motu proprio of Lucifer. It's the motu proprio of the devil, of the deceiver, of the destroyer, of the hater of truth, of the hater of God. The congregation of a religious presider over by Cardinal Braz d'Aviz is very much aligned with Francis and is going to get to work to put things in order. For example, they will make canonical visits to the seminaries to verify that the teachings given are in conformity with Vatican II, even though Vatican II taught no doctrine. And to ensure they study and celebrate the new liturgy in contravention to their actual constitutions, which they signed with the Pope, the saintly Pope John Paul II himself. And in turn, they will try to discourage vocations. And when we tell them, he says, Father Bar says, look, when we tell these prelates, you're gonna, if you attempt to do that to these institutions, you're gonna discourage vocations. People will no longer go to them. And what do these people say? They'll say, hey, we don't need these people. They're useless. And he says that was an actual response. So they do not want priests who celebrate the ancient liturgy because they will pass on the ancient faith. They're useless. They hate them. They don't want them. They'd rather have no priests and have lay women running parishes and giving communion, a communion, not a mass, but just the communion liturgy. Just, here you go, communion. Then actually have priests offering the ancient sacrifice because they adhere to the ancient liturgy, the ancient faith. So for them, the good of souls is little importance. In fact, yes, for them, the good of souls is Vatican II, even though Vatican II defined no doctrine. This pontificate is attacking every place where there is priestly renewal. And that was from the beginning. And he gives the example of the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate. And he says, look, the conciliar church, again, some people think traditionalists invented the term conciliar church. But in fact, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, I gave this quote in one of my videos. He says, I didn't come up with that term. I did not come up with that term. It was either a cardinal or an archbishop or an envoy from Rome who came to Archbishop Lefebvre and told him, look, the conciliar church, blah, blah, blah. They came with the term conciliar church, meaning the church of the council. It's not the church of all time, the Catholic Church. No, it's the church of the council, the conciliar church. So he says the conciliar church is very sick. In some places, it's dying. I think in France, like almost 10% of all ordinations to the priesthood are in traditional orders, or maybe even higher than that. So, and then he says, like, how can bishops react? So a lot of bishops are using Canon 87 of the Code of Canon Law, which says a diocesan bishop, whenever he judges that it contributes to their spiritual good, is able to dispense the faithful from universal and particular disciplinary laws issued for his territory or his subjects by the supreme authority, meaning the Pope of the Church. So he can dispense with it. You tell me not to erect personal parishes, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to erect personal parishes. You're telling me I can't have masses in parish churches, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to dispense the faithful from that. I'm going to have them in parishes. So bishops, if they're willing to stand up for the truth, for the true faith, then they can. He says, he tries to, he says, Simon Pontificate said that the Mass has never been abrogated. He says, then Francis again abrogates it. No, he doesn't. Not one word in his motu proprio abrogates anything. As I said, in his letter to the bishops, he gives the impression that he's abrogating, but he doesn't abrogate nothing. He abrogates nothing. Plus, he cannot abrogate. No pope, nobody can abrogate or abolish an apostolic rite. Period. Nobody. They'd make him a schismatic, outside the church, excommunicate. He will excommunicate himself, as probably Paul VI did, So he says, look, everything is allowed now. Any heresy can be professed by men of the church who still get to keep their Catholic identity card, except those who celebrate or attend the traditional Mass. No, they are accused by the Pope himself of tearing apart the unity of the church. And that's exactly what Cardinal Ratzinger said in 1988. Any denial of doctrine or dogma or the magisterium or attack, it's fine and dandy. But adhere to the ancient liturgy, ancient mass, ancient faith, that's not allowed. So the bottom line is that this hatred of the traditional mass has a doctrinal basis. Absolutely. It is the hatred of Tridentine, which is the Council of Trent ecclesiology, which is the ecclesiology of the church for 2,000 years. It's the hatred of the Tridentine ecclesiology and all that this mass represents from the point of view of Eucharistic doctrine. And you will see here a Jesuit father, he will talk. We have to alter the mass to reach to reflect the new understanding of Eucharistic doctrine. New understanding. So the old understanding is no more. That's why we have to alter the mass. I will show you now. So ecclesiology and Eucharistic doctrine. That's why they hate the traditional mass, because it reflects the traditional faith, the real faith, the true Christian faith, the true Roman Rite. So this is the article which started it, which made me think, well, okay, maybe I'll do it. And one of my another long-winded videos, which are very informative, if I have to say so myself. But I know they take a while to watch. But whatever. I'll do what I think is useful, and I hope that you find it informative and useful, and maybe entertaining a bit. All right, let's look at some... I'm going to put my little headphones here so I can make sure I'm listening to the innovators in their own words. We have one of our favorite pro-Francis Vatican II. Deny every doctrine except, of course, the ones I think are okay. Here is, what's his name? Max Bean, Massimo Fagioli. All right, let's see. And this is, Dr. Taylor Marshall took this video, clipped it or whatever it is, from America Magazine, or he was talking with America Magazine. And let's see what he says here.
But he's saying, look, you can have that Latin Mass. Okay.
Just let me see if I can increase the volume here a bit. All right, let's see.
But he's saying, look, you can have that Latin Mass, okay? You cannot have the theology of the 16th century that was at the basis of Latin Mass. It's a distinction that, but he's saying, look, you can have that Latin Mass.
Hear that? Hear
okay?
That? Yeah.
You cannot have the theology of the 16th century that was at the basis of Latin Mass. It's a distinction that...
So you can have the Latin Mass, but you can't have the theology, which was at the 16th century theology, which is at the basis of the Latin Mass. Again, another lie, because the rite of the so-called Latin Mass, which is the traditional Roman Rite, is the exact same Mass, which was celebrated in 1100 in Rome, and it's virtually identical to the liturgy of which was celebrated from Pope St. Gregory the Great in the 6th century, 6th or 7th centuries. It is not the theology of the 16th century, it's the theology of the Church of 2,000 years. And it's the theology of the Ancient Roman Rite, the real Latin Mass, matches the same theology you find in all the ancient churches, all the ancient rites, from the Armenian, the Coptic, the Ethiopic, the Syriac, the Byzantine, you name it. Same theology, theology of sacrifice, priesthood, Holy of Holies, worship of the divine sacraments, the offering of the unbloody lamb, the hierarchy, the hierarchical structure of the church, the bishop being almost the Christ of the diocese, all of that, the ecclesiology of the universal church, is reflected in the rites of the ancient church, East and West. But they hate that. And look what they just did in Vatican and Rome by Edward Penton showing the altar. Just in August 21st, 2021. I'll go full screen here. See if you can see it well. I don't know if it's clear or not, but anyways. So this is the altar of St. Joseph, traditional altar. And what did they do? They put outside of the sanctuary area the Holy of Holies, as I explained in my Latin Mass video. Under the altar, the high altar, is the canopy, which, if you look at the temple pictures, this is the Holy of Holies. The priest says at the prayers at the foot of the altar, I will make me worthy to enter into the Holy of Holies. Because this is the Holy of Holies. The area before the altar, if it's a bigger church, would be the holies and the choir section. And then so they took this thing outside of the sanctuary completely, so the priest can celebrate Mass facing the people of the deformed rite of Paul VI. This is the hatred. You can see a different theology, a different doctrine. No, we can't celebrate the Mass facing God, facing the East, facing the rising sun, as all liturgies of all the churches from the beginning have. No, we have to follow the novelties of the Protestant heretics and face the people. Because it's just a meal. We're going to eat some bread. All right? Oh, we talked about Father this lay professor of theology at St. Anselmo in Italy, in Rome, which has who hates the traditional liturgy, which we're actually going to go through an article he wrote, but from the Catholic World Report, the increasing influence of the liturgical school of St. Anselmo in the Vatican. July 22nd, 2021. And in it, he says here, one of the most prominent teachers at the St. Anselmo is the theologian Andrea Grillo, a vigorous defender of recent motu proprio de traditionis custodes. Among the other things, Grillo has campaigned in favor of imposing institutional silence on Pope Emeritus. So he wants to silence Pope Benedict XVI. He wants to shut him up, and attacked repeatedly the four cardinals who presented the dubia about Pope Francis' apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia. Two cardinals are dead. Now only Burke and Brandmüller are still alive. So he attacks doctrine. He attacks Pope Benedict. He is a promoter of the false rites of Paul VI because he likes the false doctrine, which the false liturgy promotes, a neo-Protestantism. Maggioni and Archbishop Marini were both members of the commission that drafted the Motu Proprio Magnum Principium of September 3rd, where the Pope said, okay, you know what, Rome is not going to take care of the translation of the liturgy, vernacular. You guys go ahead and translate it as you please. Go ahead. So here is our buddy, our friend, Andrea Grillo. Grillo, I guess his brain has been grilled, so medium rare, or maybe well done grilled, so that's why he can't think anymore. It has been darkened from all the grilling. It became so black that that's all he can, his heart conveys blackness. So this is his article. And I agree on certain things, from supreme pontiffs to guardians of tradition, Summorum Pontificum, because this is Benedict's letter, Summorum Pontiff, Supreme Pontiff, which basically says, look, the Supreme Pontiff has always guarded the liturgy, which is true. Now, guardians of tradition of Francis, basically it's like, guard tradition, keep it in there, boys, don't let it out the doors, and get these people slowly out of tradition into the new rite of Vatican II. So eventually close the doors and tradition completely and shut it down. Be guardians, be the guardians of tradition, guard it. All right. So here we go. Pope Francis overturns the sophistry of having two Roman rites and restores the common sense and eventually common worship. So for him, as if there is one Roman rite, as if the new rite is even common to two churches. I can go to one church very reverently celebrate it and go to a Mickey Mouse running around children's liturgy in another church. Yeah, seeing common worship, common in Babel, like the Tower of Babel, different languages, different. Nobody understands anybody anymore. Chaos everywhere. That is the common worship he wants. But he understands there are no two Roman rites. There's the real Roman Rite, which has a heritage of 2,000 years, and in fact, the liturgical novelty of the new rite, which these are the very words of Paul VI, His novelty, his innovation, which he himself used. These are the words he used. The new rite. It's not the Roman Rite. It's the fake Roman Rite. So yeah, when Benedict says, this is the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, and this is the ordinary form of the Roman Rite. No, this is the real Roman Rite, and that's the fake Roman Rite. That's the apostolic rite of the Western Church, of the Roman Church, and this is the fabricated liturgy of Bernini and Paul VI to expunge every Catholic notion out of the liturgy as much as possible and make it acceptable to Protestant heretics. That is what it is. The real Roman Rite, the fake Roman Rite. The pre-conciliar rite and the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI. The Mass of Vatican II. Between Christ and Belial. Alright? I'm not saying because even the new liturgy, a valid consecration happens. Christ is really there, celebrated. So when I am attacking, I'm not attacking that you receive God, that there's valid Mass, and indeed gives you holiness, but it eventually will destroy your faith. That's why you see so many Catholics, as soon as they receive confirmation, no longer practice the faith. Okay, I got my graduation certificate. I became confirmed. Okay, bye. Bye. Why? Because the worship has altered their faith. They reach a certain level of understanding, and then there's like, that's kind of a boring liturgy. I want to see a priest who's funny. I want to watch a show. I want a priest who talks about Cobb's bread. And that's from personal experience. I went, and this is actually a church, a Novus Ordo parish, very well, beautifully designed, traditionally designed church, very nicely done. Only altar boys are used. Excellent. I haven't seen this new priest. I was told he was really funny. It's great to have actually a funny priest and who engages you and explains things in maybe a simple way and a way people understand, children understand, to explain the faith. I haven't seen him, so I can't judge him. That's great, actually, if he engages people. But the problem with the new Mass is that's all that matters. Is the priest entertaining? Is he entertaining? Is he engaging? Is he very charismatic? Does he draw me? And the actual Mass, which is the whole point of being there, the sacrifice, the very presence of Christ upon the altar, the eating of the God himself, sharing in the divinity of him who shared himself on our humanity, that's secondary or not even in the mind anymore. And I don't blame the people. This is what the new Mass has caused. People, if the priest isn't entertaining or engaging, I'm not going to go there anymore. I will go to a traditional Mass, a Roman Rite, even though the priest sometimes, when we do have actually, one priest when we used to have 3 priests at our fraternity and parish in where I am, we had 3 priests, now we only have 2. When we had 3 priests, 2 priests were very engaging, 2 different styles, very engaging. The 3rd priest sometimes he's quite engaging, but he's not an orator. He's not so his sermons are kind of, okay. You have to really concentrate to understand, which is fine. But again, I'm not judging the Mass because of the priest. Again, I would prefer the other priest who's more of an orator and more engaging in his preaching. That's understandable. But again, the focus is the Mass. The focus is the sacrifice. The focus is the divine liturgy. As the Byzantine Rite says, the offering of the holy korbana, the holy sacrifice. القربان المقدس. That's the focus. The priest is important as when he's explaining. It would be better for an engaging priest. But I cannot judge the whole parish and the whole church because, I like that priest. Oh, I don't like that priest. I would not like a priest if he teaches error, if he teaches heresy, if he's very irreverent. I do not like that priest. But if a priest is reverent, teaches the Catholic faith, maybe boring, but okay, fine, I'll stand the boring. Engaging would be great. But again, the problem with the new Mass is that we judge the priest. We're not going for the Mass, we're going for the priest. Anyways, so let's see what Grilled Brain has to say here. With Summorum Pontificum, a papal act relieved the bishops of certain duties that rightfully theirs, above all the authority over the liturgy in their diocese. 2 things. That's exactly what Francis is attempting to do. He's telling bishops, don't allow the Mass and the ancient liturgy in your parish churches. Don't allow personal parishes to exist. Try to shut them down whenever you have the opportunity. If you feel so desired. It's up to you. Shut them down. Don't allow. So Francis is doing the exact same thing of what this grill guy is saying. Grilled brain man is saying. All right. But what did Pope Benedict do? He protected these congregations. Why? Because he knew the hatred of many, even the vast majority of bishops, to the ancient rite, to the ancient liturgical heritage of the church, to the ancient faith. That's why he attempted to say, it's not in your hands. This has never been abrogated. It is the Roman Rite, and these are Roman Rite priests, and they can celebrate the Roman Rite whenever they so please. It is not up to you to say, well, you can't celebrate the Roman Rite. It's the Roman Rite. How dare you tell me not to celebrate? I will celebrate it. It's my right as a Roman Rite priest. That's what Benedict gave them, made this rite explicit. They can't ban the Roman Rite. right? But Francis here is telling bishops, don't allow masses in these churches. Don't allow new orders to be formed. Don't allow new exclusive Roman Rite parishes to be formed. Shut them down whenever you feel it's not conducive to the spiritual well-being of your people. Shut them down. So Francis is doing exactly that. The CT of like the CT scan, of Francis. With CT, this authority is returned to its legitimate holders. Lie, as I just told you. There you go. The bold sophistry of the two forms of the one Roman Rite. Yeah, I agree. There's the real Roman Rite, which is the traditional Roman Rite, and the liturgical innovation of the new Rite, the novelty of Paul VI. Yeah, it's true. This is the man who has extreme influence in Rome and upon Francis, the Bishop of Rome. This radically supplants the bold sophistry on which Summorum Pontificum stood, namely the parallel coexistence of two ritual forms, which contradict each other. Which contradict each other. Which contradict each other. That's why they cannot allow the real Roman Rite, which teaches the real Catholic faith, which contradicts the deformed rite, novelty of Paul VI, which teach a novel faith. The re-establishment of a single valid form. Well, and the new Roman Rite, the fake Roman Rite of Paul VI, it's not really a valid form in the sense of it has any history. It is a fabrication, on-the-spot product, as Ratzinger says. The re-establishment of a single valid form of the Roman Rite is the horizon on which is possible to build peace. Yes, with the elimination and throwing in the garbage the fake Roman Rite of Paul VI. Then we have a single Roman Rite and all the ancient rites of the churches. The Sarum Rite, the Masoretic Rite, the Rite of Braga, the Dominican Rite, the Carthusian Rite, and all the other rites of the religious orders. There can be no original competition between the two ritual forms. Because there is no competition between the real Roman Rite and the fake fabrication of Paul VI. There is no competition. That's why Jorge Mario Bergoglio, aka Francis of Rome, Bishop of Rome, cannot allow the proliferation and the expansion of the real Roman Rite because the fake Roman Rite can't compete with it. That's why. He can't stand the heat. There can be no original competition between the two ritual forms, two ritual forms, one of which formulated after Vatican II to amend the previous one. So he admits it's formulated after Vatican II. It's a new fabrication. So if you're given the choice, hey boys, you claim to be Catholics, you claim to adhere to the one Christian faith and which comes to you from the apostles. Now, do you want to accept the liturgy formulated before 1969 and which contradicts, according to grilled brain here, the liturgy formulated after 1969? So I forgot even the question. Would you accept the one which was there for 1900 years or the one after? Which would you supposedly believe in the apostolic faith and the ancient faith accept? The real one, the ancient one, or something we invented 50 years ago? Now, if you say something invented 50 years ago, then you basically reject 2,000 years of Catholic teaching. So if you're giving me this choice, grill brain, then you have to, if you're a Catholic, you must choose the ancient rite and reject the fake Roman Rite. You have no option. You have no option. Don't have much with him. So the problem with ritual parallelism. Now one must recognize there is only one table. that of the Reformed Rite. He's telling us, that's it. Only one table. One table. Notice the words. Table. Not altar. Table of the Reformed Rite. And let's listen. The tradition of the Roman Rite is found there. Well, why do you want to ban the old one if the tradition... So you're telling me the tradition of the Roman Rite is not found in the Ancient Rite? And nowhere else. He tells you. It's not in the Ancient Rite. It's not in any of the ancient liturgies of the religious orders. No. The tradition of the Roman Rite is found in the liturgical innovation of the new rite, the novelty of Paul VI. And nowhere else. Oh yeah. Okay, welcome to Insane Land. And it will no longer be possible for the entire Vatican offices to waste their time reforming the Roman Rite. That is no longer in force. Well, it's never been abrogated. It cannot be abrogated, cannot be banned. And why would you reform it? It is the Roman Rite, the real Roman Rite. You already have a deformed liturgy. Why do you want to put your fingers into the ancient rite? Because they hate the ancient faith. And he talks about one table. Let's see what he means here. There is no longer a separate competence over the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, which no longer has autonomous existence. Whatever, just shut your mouth. Where did I see this? Oh yeah, it's coming down here. Remember the word here. Table. One table. Creating parallel churches and opposing Vatican II. I guess then you have a parallel church in the Greek Melkite Church, the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the Coptic Catholic Church, the Armenian Catholic Church, the Maronite Church, the Syrio-Malabar Church. You got competing churches, if you want to use his illogic. But of course, that's what you get from having your brain grilled. The effects of the earlier concessions, it's not concessions, Benedict XVI recognized the fact that it has never been juridically abrogated. It cannot be abrogated, which is something which comes to us from the ancient past. Cannot. And it was always licit. So it was not a concession of nothing. It was a recognition of a right. The effects of the earlier concessions helped to foment a church that was immune to the Second Vatican Council, immune to the mere pastoral council which defined no doctrine, as using the words of Cardinal Ratzinger again. So, yeah. Because the fake liturgy of Vatican II makes people immune to the ancient faith, immune to the 20 ecumenical councils which preceded Vatican II. Thanks to Summorum Pontificum, the Old Mass became practically a symbol of opposition to Vatican II, which is basically what Francis is regurgitating. But again, what do you mean by opposition? Acceptive Vatican II. What do you mean by that? I already talked about that enough. And for this reason, the criteria to access it had to be carefully reviewed so as not to generate any further abominations. So adhering to the ancient Mass, adhering to the liturgical heritage of the Roman Church, adhering to apostolic rite of the Roman Church, to the rite of St. Peter, which this rite of St. Gregory, the most ancient rite of the Western Church, which conveyed the ancient faith. To adhere to it, to celebrate it, to practice it, is to generate abominations. The abominations are generated by the Novus Ordo Missae of Paul VI. The abominations and the paganizations, which is the worship of demons, are generated by the liturgical novelty innovation of the new rite of Paul VI. The liturgy of Vatican II, if you want to put it that way. That's where abominations are being generated. Francis says, enough is enough. Enough is enough. The truly extraordinary thing in this whole affair is not so much the re-establishment of the normal relationship of Lex Orandi and Lex Credendi. Remember what I said. Remember what Francis said, Lex Orandi, the only way of praying. He skipped the second part, the Lex Credendi, the law of faith, which is assured by Traditionis Custodes. So with the motu proprio. Here is again a further admission that the law of prayer is the law of faith. That's why they hate the ancient liturgy, because the law of prayer conveys the law of faith, the ancient faith, which they reject. So Pope Francis, son of the council. I guess Ratzinger wasn't a son of the council. Ratzinger was a father of the council. Here are the intentions of the fathers of the council. He wasn't a father in a bishop sense. He was a priest, but he was one of the prime movers and shakers, one of the periti of the council. Francis Jorge was nowhere there, nowhere to be found. Has done good, has the good sense and wisdom to say, enough is enough. Enough with the true Catholic faith. Enough with the true Catholic rite, the Roman Rite. Enough with the rigid discipline of the ancient church. Enough with the rigid doctrine of the ancient church. Enough. That's what Francis is saying. Now remember the word table. He has wisely opened a new phase, which the quality of the rite, of the ritual act, is played out on a single table. Common and ordinary, not an altar of sacrifice. Not an altar of sacrifice. A table. Common and ordinary, ecclesial and of the people. Common and ordinary table. Yeah, bring it up front, make it out of wood, who cares? And he says, contrasted with Benedict, he re-exhuming a ritual form that no longer exists. Sorry, buddy. They're not bringing the ancient rites from the dead. It was already alive. It was never abandoned, thanks to Archbishop Lefebvre. And it has flourished. It is like the phoenix rising from the ashes. It is not like the walking corpse of the Mass of Vatican II. It's not like the walking corpse of the Spirit of Vatican II. It's not like the walking corpse of the religious orders which follow the directives, the pastoral directives of Vatican II. It's not like the walking corpse of the faith of the people have been infected by the spirit of Vatican II. We can only proceed with the common form with care and willingness, honestly and without reservation, in the school of prayer found in the new rites. He admits there are new rites. They are not the Roman Rite. This is Andrea Grilled Brain Grillo. All right, so this is a tremendous influence in Rome. That is doctrine. That is why they hate the ancient Roman Rite, the ancient liturgy of all ancient rites, not just the Roman rites. Now, here's another. I don't know how long we've been talking, but anyways. Another article by another Pope Francis worshippers, Robert McInnes from Vatican City. It's not about Latin. So when people say, oh, that's the Latin Mass. So even family members, oh, we're going to the Latin Mass. Oh, Latin, it's the Latin Mass. They just have it in Latin. Why don't they have it in English? Well, it's not about Latin. It's not about Latin, mainly. The whole Mass is different. The whole prayers are different. It is a new rite. It's a novelty. It's a complete fabrication. It is not about Latin as the innovators themselves admit. It's not about Latin as the innovators themselves admit. All right, so here's the great Cardinal Burke, which I'm going to close up this video with his comment about the authority of the Pope or lack thereof of abolishing an ancient liturgy. All right, so here is Robert McInnes. It's not about Latin. Paul VI was actively involved in the overseeing of the Reformed liturgy. Actually, in this book, it is revealed that Bonini here lied to Paul VI all the time. He's telling him, all the people in the commissions are telling me this is the way we do it. It's like, are you sure? Okay. And then people in the commissions were actually against these proposals of Bonini. And then Bonini would go to them and says, well, Paul VI says, we got to do it. And they say, oh, okay. A deceiver. What else do you expect? Paul VI, who was actively involved in the reform of the first edition of the prayers for the revised rite, using again Paul VI's words, the liturgical innovation of the new rite, not revised, new rite of Mass, 1960. And he says, people say, because the official language of the Roman Missal in all three typical editions from 1970 to 2002 is Latin, that's why it's not about Latin. It is about the rite itself. That's the Mass that matters. So, what about Traditionis Custodes? One celebrity priest with a very large following wrote a long and much doubted piece to defend the new text, explaining why he enjoys celebrating Mass in English rather than Latin. But again, shows you the ignorance even of most priests and the vast majority of Catholics. It's not just Latin. If they just simply took the ancient liturgy and translated it into the vernacular in a high quality language, there would be nothing. No. People say, okay, maybe the Mass would be said in Latin once a week on churches, and most of the time in the vernacular, but it's the same liturgy, same ritual, same words, same prayers, same faith. But now we have a different faith because it's a different liturgy. A Protestantized liturgy. Protestant advisors were advising little Bugnini, Hannibal Bugnini, Hannibal the little bug, was in how to deform the Mass, to make it acceptable for the separated brethren. So they don't find the liturgy, the Catholic liturgy, too problematic. Francis published the motu proprio to curtail and it seems to eventually suppress, that's his desire, the celebration of Mass in its pre-Vatican II form. Actually, Vatican II celebrated the exact same Mass. But of course he won't say that. Pre-1970 form. Not the Mass in Latin. Thank you, Mr. McInnes, Robert McInnes. Yeah, it's not about Latin. It's about the Mass itself. The real Roman Rite versus the fake Roman Rite. The real Christian faith, Catholic faith as expressed in the ancient prayers, or the watered-down Catholic faith as taught in the liturgical innovation of the new rite of Paul VI. That's why. This old form is commonly called Mass in the Tridentine Rite. Following the Missal that Pope Pius, actually very few people call it the Tridentine Rite anymore, it's just a traditional Mass, the traditional Latin Mass. Pope Pius V issued in 1570, shortly after the Council of Trent. Again, here's an honest man. Again, the Pius didn't just invent a new fabricated liturgy, but he had the exact same Missal of 100 years before, 200 years before, just edited certain parts. He did not fabricate a new Missal. You can see that. This Missal, the traditional Roman Rite of Pius V, this Missal was updated or changed slightly over the course of centuries, up until 1962, when John the 23rd issued its final edition, just before Vatican II went underway. So here's an admission. The real Roman Rite was changed over the centuries very slightly. And the last edition of the real Roman Rite was the 1962 edition of John the 23rd, which incorporated, unfortunately, some of the deforms of Bugnini here, especially the reform of Holy Week, and some simplifications in the rubrics. Hopefully they'll be go back to the pre-1955 edition, the full Roman liturgy. But anyways, that is why in all these missals, including John the 23rd's 1962 version, there is the bull quo primum of Pius V, which says this is the perpetual rite, cannot be abrogated, cannot be abolished, all priests are free to use it. And this is another admission that what came after by Paul VI is not the same rite, is a fabrication, because it's not just not just like maybe a heavily edited, updated, or changed rite of Pius V. Let's assume hermeneutics of continuity. No, it's not. He says this missal was very slightly changed over the course of centuries up to John the 23rd in 1962, because Paul VI had himself said a new rite, a novelty, an innovation. Ratzinger called it a fabricated liturgy, a rupture, and so forth. A new rite. End of the story. It's not the Roman rite. It's a fabricated liturgy. All right, so again, it's a matter of doctrine. Pre-Vatican II meaning the true Catholic faith, or post-Vatican II meaning the watered-down Mickey Mouse version of Catholic faith. Again, there's a bit of a deception here. The bishops of Vatican II and liturgical restructuring. They did not say that. He gave permission to return to a different form of the ritual from the ritual form that the bishops of the Second Vatican Council overwhelmingly vote to restructure. False. Vatican II does not say restructure the Mass. He says restore it in the tradition of the fathers, and preserve the ancient rites, the Latin rites, preserve them and foster them in every way, not restructure them. A lie here. And even if it did say that, no pope or council can override apostolic tradition or the apostolic rites. So even if an ecumenical council says, give us a brand new Mass and ban the apostolic liturgies, it'd be null and void. Has to be defied and ignored and refused to be obeyed. They do not have that competence, as we saw how the ancient bishops of Asia Minor refused the command of Pope St. Victor I just to celebrate Easter Sunday on the same day as Rome, not alter their whole liturgy. They refused, said, no, can't do that. We never innovated in anything. We're keeping the tradition that we received. And they were right. St. Irenaeus supported them. Traditional Catholics do not embrace and defend the old rite because of the Latin. Thank you, Robert McInnes. You are correct. It's not because of the Latin. No, they either contest the validity of the Reformed liturgy outright or judge it to be inferior to the Tridentine Mass. It is inferior in every way, form, and shape, especially if we're talking about doctrine and the conveyance of devotion to the Eucharist and reverence. It is inferior in every way to the real Roman Rite. Now, the validity is a open question. What do you mean by validity? Was validly promulgated? Was it? I mean, Paul VI presented the missal to be used. Validity meaning there's a consecration happening. Okay, some sedevacantes traditionals say no, there's no consecration happening because they even deny the priesthood exists anymore. So these people have gone into cuckoo land. But I would say, well, it's valid in the sense, yeah, there's a sacrifice happening there, but it's definitely an inferior liturgy and should be removed and thrown in the garbage bin of history because it is a Protestantized liturgy. It's not Catholic, it's not apostolic, with the admission of Paul VI himself. And even does the Pope even have no Pope has the authority to abolish an ancient rite. he may have an authority to introduce a new rite, but again, it cannot be the universal rite. So even in that sense, well, anyways, I'll leave it at that. They actually contend erroneously that the post-conciliar reform invented a brand new type of mass. You heard Cardinal Ratzinger, prefect of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, say basically that. I already went at the beginning of the video. You can go watch it from the beginning. You heard bishops say that. Inventors of the new mass say that. You read this book. That's the whole purpose of the deformed liturgical destruction of the Roman Rite. Cardinal Ottaviani said that. Monsignor Klaus Gamber said that. So, yeah, it's a new rite. There's Paul VI himself, a brand new type of mass. Okay, well, actually, I'm going to go to Paul VI right away just to show you the lie. They actually erroneously, actually correctly, contend that the post-conciliar reform represents a brand new type of mass. Let's look at what Paul VI himself said. He has two, as I said in my video, I have his two speeches, which he repeats it over and over again. New rite, innovation, novelty, blah, 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 blah. Here he is, Paul VI. In his audience of November 26, 1969. So this is what he says. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to point you this. We ask you to return your minds once again to the liturgical innovation of the new rite of the Mass. This new rite, blah, blah, blah. A new rite of the Mass. A change in venerable tradition that has gone on for centuries. This is something that affects our hereditary religious patrimony, which seem to enjoy the privilege of being unchangeable and settled. And he calls it a novelty. This novelty is no small thing. Blah, blah, blah. So here is Paul VI himself telling you, new rite, novelty, innovation, not a small thing, against all the history, because the Mass and liturgy was considered unchangeable and untouchable. And at the end of his address, he says, okay, to conclude, blah, 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 for the Latin text, priests who celebrate in Latin, in private and also in public, in cases provided by the legislation, may use either the Roman Missal or the new rite until November, blah, blah, blah. So they can use the Roman Missal or the new rite. So yeah, it is a new Mass, buddy. A new rite, an innovation, a novelty. Church is something which is hereditary and untouchable. Like, what more do you want? Here's the fabricator of the liturgy, Paul VI. So yeah, no, it's not erroneous. It is actually correct. Cardinal Burke rebukes Francis. And notice they call him Cardinal Burke, and they don't even call him Pope Francis. Okay, that's good. They rebuke Francis for taking severe action. So, don't believe me? Listen to what Cardinal Burke has to say about this matter. Actually, we're going to end up with Cardinal Burke. I'm not going to go through his whole... Here's the Cardinal Burke. Huge statement, but I'm just going to point one thing in it. What Cardinal Burke says, what happened after the Second Vatican Council constitutes a radical change in the form of the Roman Rite. With the elimination of many prayers, ritual gestures, for example, many genuflections, frequent kissing of the altar, and other elements. And not only that, the actual prayers themselves, almost every prayer, not in only the Mass, but all the sacraments, was completely altered and reformulated. Everything. And this is what Cardinal Ratzinger said. A fabricated liturgy. Paul VI, a new rite. Change. It's not a delusion. That's why there's completely different rites. It's not about Latin. It's about the rite. It's about the prayers, about the ritual, about the doctrine conveyed in the ancient rite versus the doctrine conveyed in the new deformed liturgy. The 73-year-old cardinal's real beef is with the Reformed Rite itself, which he contends did not conform to the actual teachings of Vatican II, which basically Cardinal Ratzinger himself stated, and I quoted this already. Contesting the reform. Oh, how did they contest the reform? These evil people. They viciously maligned and spread mendacious rumors about those who oversaw its work, meaning Annibale Bonini. And actually, I'm working on I'll do a video soon, whenever I get a chance, based upon articles in 30 Days Magazine, Friends of His Eminence, and Freemasonry and the application of the liturgical reform, where they talk about our buddy Bugnini, the Hannibal, the little bug. Okay, so it's not maligned and spread mendacious rumors. It's facts. It doesn't matter actually if he was the saintless, the most saintly man on earth. But he did what he did is absolute evil and absolutely wrong. We don't need to attack the man. We attack the work itself, which is for all to see. There are books on every prayer, the propers, how they were completely altered from one to the other. And how the mention of hell and punishment and judgment and everything Catholic has been, the communion of the saints, intercession of the saints, has been eliminated or reduced or altered to match more our Protestant brethren's understanding or lack of understanding of the true Christian faith. Okay. There are entire communities and their priests that will only and exclusively use the pre-Vatican rite of Mass and other sacraments. Ooh, so evil, so bad. Has to be eliminated. Again, here it is again. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. Suddenly the Modernists discovered the slogan Lex Orandi Lex Credendi, the way you pray is the way you believe. Suddenly, magically, this was the slogan of all the traditionalists for 50 years. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. You change the way you pray, you change the way you believe. Suddenly the Modernists mention it now. But they are mentioning it, confirming that the way you believe in the old rite, the way you pray in the old rite will have a way of believing, and then the fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, the fake Roman Rite, the way you pray will have a different way of believing, which is an admission. What do we choose? Do we choose the ancient faith or the new faith? The ancient liturgy, which conveys the ancient apostolic Catholic faith, or the liturgy of Bonini and Paul VI, invented in the 1960s? Which one? If you want to be Catholic, you adhere to the you want to be a Christian, you adhere to the ancient faith, the ancient liturgy. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi, suddenly discovered by the modernist. The difference between the old rite and the reformed rite, the deformed liturgy, boils down to the ancient dictum, Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. Our worship reflects what we actually believe. Our liturgy reflects our theology and ecclesiology. Now you understand why they hate the Latin Mass, the ancient Roman Rite, and the ancient liturgies of all the churches. They hate them because the ancient prayers reflect the ancient faith. They want to update them, reform them, the way you pray, because it will change what you believe. That is why. Most Catholics, including Pope Francis, believe that the Second Vatican Council was a watershed moment. Remember what Ratzinger I quoted at the beginning. Some people think Vatican II was a start from zero, a super dogma, ignoring all the rest. That's the mentality of these people. In the life of the church, which through the grace of the Holy Spirit helped gain a new understanding and develop a new formulations of our faith tradition. Our faith tradition, which contradicts tradition. See? So yeah, it's not about Latin. It's about the faith, about the creed. The Lex Orandi, the way you pray, affects the way you believe. That's why they hate the ancient Roman Rite and the ancient Byzantine Rite and the ancient Coptic Rite and the ancient Chaldean Rite and the ancient Maronite Rite and the ancient Syriac Rites. That's why they hate them. It's not about the language. It's about the doctrine which the ancient liturgies convey. And should I close with this? Yeah. Actually, this is kind of in the wrong position here. Let's go here. Now, this is the last article, basically, before we do our closing. I know I've said that before, but if you watch enough of my videos, you know, sometimes I think a video will take half an hour, it takes an hour. Sometimes I think it takes an hour, it takes 3. But, you know, whatever. So this is an article by another Jesuit, Thomas Rees. By Thomas Rees. Let's not put father there. Just Thomas Rees is good enough. I'm a cool dude, man. I'm a cool Jesuit, man. Thomas Rees is good. No bother with father. Because, you know, Protestants say, don't call any man father, you know. So we just call me Tommy. Tommy. Hey, Tommy Rees. So, I wasn't able with this article, again published recently, August 13th. I wasn't able to highlight with my highlighters. For some reason, didn't work on the screen, but it doesn't matter. Don't what's the word? Don't fret. I have made some notes. I have made notes on my little piece of paper here. See that? Some notes, so I can know where to look. But what did Thomas say? Tommy boy. What did Tommy boy say? The future of Catholic liturgical reform. So, of course, he wants to invent whatever, you know, invent this and invent that and do this and do that. But let's ignore that part. But let's find what... paragraph 2, as I said. In the 1960s here, in the 1960s and 70s, well, really it started in the 19s. They started tinkering with the liturgy even as soon as Vatican II ended. Paul VI implemented revolutionary liturgical reforms. It wasn't a small little thing. Paul VI says it's no small thing. It's a new rite, it's a novelty, it's an innovation, which is going to cause disturbance and annoyance and pain in the hearts of the faithful. It's not some editing, updating of the Roman Missal. We've seen that from all the Modernists themselves, which speak. Okay? Paul VI implemented revolutionary liturgical reforms laid out by the Second Vatican Council, which is not true because the Second Vatican Council told preserve and foster all the rites, ancient rites, Latin and Eastern. All right, so up to his death. So here's an admission from Tommy Boy John for Tommy Rees, father, Jesuit, that Paul VI implemented revolutionary liturgical reforms. Paul VI calls it a new rite, an innovation and novelty. What more do you want? It's not the Roman Rite. It's the fake Roman Rite. It's the rite of Paul VI. Total invention. Okay. That's another admission. Oh, you people are just being finicky with the Latin Mass. He just, improved it slightly. He just did a little minor change. No. Here's an admission. Paul VI admits himself. Grab a traditional missal and look at the prayers. Compare them with your new ordinary form Mass. Completely different. Okay, now the section on ignore enculturation, all that stuff. Ecumenism. Again, he admits what he did. All right, so here it is. Besides the liturgical renewal, renewal. He just said a revolutionary liturgical reform. Vatican II emphasized improving relations with other Christian churches, meaning Protestant churches, because this liturgical destruction of the Roman Rite made all the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox go with like, holy smokes. Now they have gone totally insane. It has separated. The ancient Roman Rite is very close in theology, doctrine, ritual to the ancient rites of all the churches. The fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, the revolutionary liturgical reform, as Tommy Rees says, made a huge separation between the apostolic churches and the Roman Church, and a closeness with the heretical ecclesial communities originating from the 16th century deformation. So, one of the ways that is to move our liturgical ceremony. So we have to move our liturgical ceremonies closer together. Of course, the Protestants and Anglicans and Lutherans never changed anything. No, we take our own. There's a book behind me here. I'm not going to stand up and go get it. It's called the Mass of Paul VI, and Cranmer, Michael Davies' trilogy, a liturgical revolution trilogy. There's Pope John's Council, Cranmer's Godly Order, Pope John's Council, and Pope Paul's New Mass, and basically shows you that the Catholic Church, Paul VI, changed the liturgy closer to the Protestant liturgies. That's what they did. Is the Eucharist a sign of existing unity among us, among churches, or can it also be a means of fostering unity? The former excludes intercommunion, but the latter does not. So basically, they altered the liturgy to make it more Protestant, so that Protestants won't feel alienated. But it doesn't matter, alienate billions of Christians worldwide, including Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, and a billion Catholics. That's fine. That's okay. There's a center. There's theology has a couple of measurements. So the whole point of it is basically the ecumenism tells you that they changed the liturgies to match Protestant liturgies. Okay? Pre-Vatican II Mass. I think I have it. Yeah, pre-Vatican II Mass. After the Pauline reforms, which he just called up at the beginning of the article, revolutionary of the liturgy, it was presumed that the Tridentine or Latin Mass would fade away. It didn't. But some clung to the old liturgy. Oh, evil people. And Benedict said, well, people can celebrate the Mass whenever they pleased. And he says, look, the Church needs to be clear that it wants the unreformed liturgy, meaning the true liturgy, the Apostolic Rite, to disappear. The Church needs to be clear. The Church, meaning Francis and his cohorts, his junta, Jorge and his junta, need to make it clear that they want that the unreformed, meaning the pure, the unchanged liturgy, the real Roman Rite, and the real rites of all the ancient churches, to disappear. That's what they want, to disappear. Make it clear. And will only allow it out of pastoral kindness to old people who do not understand the need for change. Oh yeah, the need for change has generated so many vocations. The need for change led to the emptying of the churches. Billions of Catholics no longer believe, hundreds of millions of Catholics no longer believe in the real presence of Christ. 75% of Catholics think the Eucharist is just a symbol. because of the new liturgy. Millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Catholics left the church to Protestant sects and even to Orthodox churches. Is that that's the need for change? That's the result of it. The need for fake change. And he says this pastoral Vatican II loving Jesuit Tommy Boy says children and young people should not be allowed to attend such masses. Shouldn't be allowed to. Well, if what they're saying is children and young people, because it's stuffy and old and Latin, they would normally, of course, not be attracted to these things. That's why we need the change to attract the young people. But he contradicts himself by saying young people can't go there. Don't even allow them to go there. Why? Why? Because he knows that they will love it, that they will adhere to it. He cannot allow them to be influenced by true liturgy. Their whole argument for the revolutionary changes was, need for change. We need to get people back in, the young people. And then he wants to ban the young people from the old. Because, if the old was so repulsive, he doesn't even need to say that. But they say it. Let's go to Eucharistic prayers. After the blue section says, more importantly, listen to this. It's like makes my head ache, gives me a headache. More important than the transformation of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. Again, for him, what does that really mean? We don't really mean what it really means. Is more important than the transaction, more important that God himself coming down to earth under the veil of bread and wine, under the image, the accidents of bread and wine. But the bread is not bread, it is God himself, Jesus Christ. The wine is not wine, it is Jesus Christ himself, his blood. So more important than the divinity coming down upon our altars and giving us himself to eat. So he who humbled himself in our humanity is now inviting us to incorporate us into his divinity, to share in his divinity. So more important than that, according to Tommy Boy, is the transformation of the community into a transformation of the community into the body of Christ, so we can live out the covenant we have through Christ. So that changes the community into the body of Christ. That makes you wonder, what does he mean by when he changes the body of the bread and wine into the body of Christ? What does he mean? That's what he. So that's Tommy Boy here. So again, we see it is the hatred of the Mass. It's a revolutionary change because it's doctrine. Okay, now finally, honestly, I'm getting tired of talking. But I did, again, watch all my videos. I have so much good stuff. Some of them are not too many people watch them for some weird and strange reason. I know people like kind of quickie stuff, blah, 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 2 words, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and hey, we got our tradition fix, and that's it. We don't have the time to waste, and it's not wasting, it's educating. So now when you go through my videos and you can actually maybe watch half an hour, stop it. Next day, watch another 15-20 minutes, stop it. Next day, continue. Like you're reading a book. Then I'm giving you the sources, the reasons, the logic of our stance in adherence to the one true faith and to the ancient liturgy. If you need this little clips, oh yeah, Latin Mass, yay, defend it. How can you attack the new Mass? What's your basis? I'm giving you the basis. So anyways, I hope you guys watch a bit more of the videos and in fullness and whatever. If you like, subscribe to the channel, give thumbs up. All right, anyways, I dealt with this previously about the Council of Trent itself. In one of its decrees, it says nobody whatsoever can change the received and approved traditional liturgical rites used in administration of the sacraments to new ones. Nobody whatsoever, which includes the Pope. Okay? And in the creed of the Council of Trent, I believe, that's the creed, that's the dogma of faith, that's the infallible declaration of faith. Part of the creed, part of the faith is the apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions and all other observances and constitutions of the same church I firmly admit and embrace. So you have to. It's not an option. It's not an option to reject apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions. It is not. It is, you are bound by the Catholic faith to observe them and hold them firmly, hold them and admit them and embrace them. And what does it say? They list all the sacraments and they said, I also receive and admit the accepted and approved, the accepted meaning the received, the ancient, the traditional rites, the accepted and approved ceremonies of the Catholic Church in the solemn administration of the aforesaid sacraments, all sacraments. So I receive and admit the accepted and approved rites, ritus here in the Italian, rites, the rites, not innovation. Part of the faith, part of the Christian Catholic faith is to adhere to the ancient rites, to admit them, to approve them, to embrace them, not to change them, not to innovate them. And this is the true Catholic faith, outside of which no one can be saved. So, yes, no pope can alter them. No pope has the power. And if a pope decides to try to alter them, again, in the Reform of the Roman Liturgy by Klaus Gamber, endorsed by Cardinal Ratzinger of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he has this part to say. And I again quoted it in the previous video, and I actually went through other sources as well for his contention, that a pope would become a schismatic if he decides to alter the apostolic rites of the church, the liturgical rites of the church, and replace them with new ones. Or he simply doesn't want to even observe them himself. He would be a schismatic. Not his opinion. Opinion of eminent doctors and theologians. So, the argument could be made. So he's giving kind of the benefit of the doubt to Paul VI. Well, maybe Paul VI can introduce some new rite. Maybe. But he definitely doesn't have a right to abolish an ancient rite. I mean, even this, maybe he can introduce a new rite, is in dispute. Anyways, the argument could be made that the Pope's authority to introduce a new liturgical rite, that is, to do so without decision by a council, can be derived from the full and highest plena et suprema potestas he has in the Church, as cited by the First Vatican Council, i.e. the power over matters quae ad disciplinam et regimen ecclesiae per totum orbem diffuse pertinent, that pertain to the disciplinam, and rule of the Church, spread over the whole world. However, now this is the greatest liturgist Cardinal Ratzinger says. Okay. However, the term disciplina, which is in Vatican I, in no way applies to the liturgical rite. In no way applies to it, of the Mass or of the other sacraments. Particularly in light of the fact that the popes have repeatedly observed that the rite is founded on apostolic tradition. Therefore, he can't abolish it. For this reason alone, the rite cannot fall into the category of discipline and rule of the Church. To this, we can add that there is not a single document, not one document. Find me one, buddies. There is not one document, including the Codex Juris Canonici, the Code of Canon Law, either the traditional one, 1971, or the new one, or in the whole decretum, the old laws, which the 1917 code kind of condensed and put into one book. But there's a whole body of laws. None of them, not one single document, in which there is specific statement that the Pope, in his function as the supreme pastor, not even just as a bishop, as supreme pastor of the church, has the authority to abolish the traditional liturgical rite. In fact, nowhere is it mentioned that the Pope has the authority to change even a single local liturgical tradition. Even a single local liturgical tradition. That's why Pius V didn't dare change anything above 200 years old. 200 years, that's the liturgical tradition. I'm not touching it. Okay? The fact that there is no mention of such authority strengthens our case considerably. There are clearly defined limits to the plena et suprema potestas, full and highest power of the Pope. It's not as Benedict XVI said, the Pope is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. He is subject to scripture, tradition, faith, doctrine, Because, for example, there is no question that even in matters of dogma, the Pope, still has to follow the tradition of the universal the universal church. That is, as Vincent of Lerins says, what has been believed, quod semper, quod ubique, quod ab omnibus, always, everywhere, and by everyone. And by everyone, the church has always, from the beginning, held that you don't innovate in the liturgy. You reject novelty. That's believed by everyone, apparently until the late 50s, when Pius XII allowed, as on an experimental basis, the modification of the Holy Week rites. In fact, there are several authors which say quite explicitly that it is clearly outside the Pope's scope of authority to abolish the traditional rite. Thus, the eminent theologian Suarez, and I have in the previous video I quoted Juan de Torquemada, who in 1617, citing even earlier authors such as Cajetan, who died in 1534, took the position that the Pope would be a schismatic. And Francisco Suarez, actually, here, before we do that, here's Francisco Suarez. So he was one of the, generally regarded as the greatest scholastic after St. Thomas Aquinas. And Suarez was regarded during his lifetime as being the greatest living philosopher and theologian, and given the nickname Doctor Eximus et Pius, exceptional and pious doctor. Pope Gregory XIII attended his first lecture in Rome. Pope Paul IV invited him to refute the arguments of James I of England. So he's not a nobody, okay? Popes admired this man, greatest theologian. All right, so what does he say? Suarez, citing even earlier authors such as Cajetan, took the position that a pope would be a schismatic if he, as is his duty, would not be in full communion with the body of the church, as for example, if he were to excommunicate the entire church, or if he were to change all the liturgical rites of the church that have been upheld by apostolic tradition. And that's what Paul VI did, and that is what Francis is attempting to do. He would be a schismatic, and we don't follow the whims of schismatics. Until Paul VI. Okay, if we examine the issue of unlimited papal authority and how it relates to the authority of change the established liturgical rite, If the statements of Suarez still do not entirely convince you, but again we saw the Council of Trent, the Creed of the Council of Trent. It's part of the Catholic faith to adhere to the traditional rites. That's why if you don't, you adhere to the traditional rites in the administration of the sacraments, you become a schismatic. It is part of the creed to embrace them and adhere to them, and you cannot not do so. The fact that until Paul VI, there was not a single pope who introduced the type of fundamental changes, and using the words of Tommy Rees, revolutionary liturgical reform in liturgical forms, which we are now witnessing. That's from Klaus Gamber in his Reform of the Roman Liturgy. And I did a full review. Oh, I haven't done a review of the book. Maybe I'll do it one day. But I quoted off of it, especially here. And we will end it with the statement, the very long statement of Cardinal Burke. Not the whole statement, just again the authority of the Pope. Number 15. But can, and remember, Cardinal Burke was the supreme head of the Apostolic Signatura, which is like the Supreme Court of the Vatican. So he knows the codes of canon law, the ancient laws of the church. So he's not nobody. He's not some cardinal. He's not some bishop. He was the former head of the Apostolic Signatura. Until, of course, Jorge removed him. But can the Roman Pontiff juridically, legally, abrogate the usus antiquator, like the old rite, the ancient rite? The fullness of power, plenitudo potestatis, which we just mentioned here, right? Of the Roman Pontiff is the power necessary to defend and promote doctrine and discipline of the Church. It is not absolute power, which would include the power to change doctrine, as again we quoted right there, Klaus Gamber, or to eradicate a liturgical discipline, which has been active in the Church since the time of Pope Gregory the Great and even earlier. The correct interpretation of Article 1 cannot be which says, the new fabricated liturgy of Paul VI is the only law of prayer of the Church, of the Roman Rite, cannot be the denial that the old rite is an ever vital expression of the Lex Orandi of the Roman Rite. An ever vital. Our Lord, who gave the wonderful gift of the ancient rite, because of it comes from apostolic tradition, from Saints Peter and Paul, will not permit it to be eradicated, will not permit it to eradicated from the life of the Church. So he clearly says, the Pope does not have the power, no Pope has the power to abolish an apostolic liturgical rite, or discipline even. And so his full power, his supreme and full power over discipline, does not include abolishing an apostolic liturgical rite, which goes with Suarez, Cajetan, Torquemada, Klaus Gamber. The creed, the canon of one of the canons on the sacraments of the Council of Trent, and the creed, the doctrinal creed, an infallible declaration of faith, the creed of the Council of Trent, the profession of faith of the Council of Trent. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. We have discussed why they hate the ancient Roman Rite. Why do they hate it? People like Hannibal the Little Bug and Francis and the innovators and the promoters of the novelties. They hate it not because it's Latin. They hate it because Lex Orandi, as suddenly the modernists have discovered that. Lex Orandi Lex Credendi. The law of prayer, the law of faith. How you pray will profoundly affect what you believe. And what you believe will affect how you live. That is the reason they want to abolish the apostolic rite of the Roman Church. That is why they want to force us to adhere to the liturgical innovation of the new rite, the novelty of Paul VI, because it conveys a novel, a new understanding. Oh, I closed it. Tommy Rees as well. I remember I forgot something. Thomas Rees there in his article. He says, and we need to revise our liturgies, the canon, on the part of the canon of the Mass. We need to revise it to reflect our new understanding of the Eucharist, our new understanding. Meaning, well, I guess for 1970 years, we understood the Eucharist wrong, and now we have a new understanding, which we have to alter the Mass, the liturgy, and the canon to reflect this new understanding. New understanding of the ecclesiology, and new understanding of the Eucharist. You understand now why they hate the ancient Rite liturgy. But we say, whatever, man. We will stay calm and carry on. And any priest, all priests, must adhere to the Roman Rite. Priests adhere to the Roman Rite, to the real Roman Rite, not to the fake fabrication of Paul VI. Anyways, I've said enough. That's it. That's all. And I'll see you soon with another video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And see you next time. Bye-bye.